At that moment, the strong wind blew Jian Wushuang's black hair. He looked at the chaotic divine thunder with a serious expression. The Hundun divine lightning hadn't even struck yet, but the overwhelming pressure already made him unable to hold on and his body began to tremble. In front of this divine lightning, he was as small as an ant looking up at the sky. The Hundun divine lightning was much more powerful than the five elements divine lightning. Break! Jian Wushuang growled and his body glowed with a golden light. His blood qi was boiling and his purple-gold eyes were even more dazzling. Bang! Facing this divine lightning, he took a step forward and went against the flow of the divine lightning. He then punched the divine lightning. Boom! With a loud explosion, Jian Wushuang's figure drew an arc in the air like a kite with a broken string and fell to the ground. Jian Wushuang was defeated by only one divine thunder. His god body, which was as bright as gold and stone, had thousands of cracks. He was like a ceramic doll that was glued together and was about to break. Ha 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 ha. Good blow. Kill Jian Wushuang. Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog burst into laughter upon seeing this. As for the ninth Culpa King, his eyes narrowed, and his heart continued to sink. He had just received a message from the Blood Wave Supreme, ordering him to return to the Divine Life Palace as soon as possible. The Divine Life Palace was in a state of extreme urgency under the pressure of the five great factions. Before his eyes, Jian Wushuang was facing the chaotic lightning tribulation and was in a situation where he had a slim chance of survival. Cough, cough, cough. Jian Wushuang coughed heavily, as if he was about to suffocate. He spat out black smoke. He took a deep breath and turned to Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog. He asked coldly, "Do you think it's funny?" Hearing this, Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog felt even more amused. They looked at each other and shook their heads. Jian Wushuang, the sins of the heavens can be forgiven, but the sins of one's own self cannot be lived. Now that even the heavens want to kill you, who can you blame? Buzz, buzz, buzz. In the sky, the second chaotic divine lightning was gradually accumulating. Its power was even stronger than before. Jian Wushuang raised his head to look at the lightning tribulation in the sky, then looked at Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog again. The corners of his mouth gradually pulled up into a sinister sneer. Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog looked at Jian Wushuang, who had a malicious look on his face, and for some reason, their hearts suddenly quivered. "Jian Wushuang, what do you want?" Long Qing asked, pretending to be calm. "What are you doing? Didn't you say that the heavens wanted to kill me?" With a sneer, Jian Wushuang stomped his feet and charged toward Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog. The primal chaos lightning tribulation above Jian Wushuang's head also moved along with his movement. "Not good. Jian Wushuang. This little thief wants to drag us to bear the lightning tribulation with him." Supreme Green Dog's scalp went numb as he shouted. Long Qing's face also turned blank. The thunder calamity did not have an active consciousness. It would only lock onto Jian Wushuang. As for the others that appeared within the range of the thunder calamity, it would only treat them as Jian Wushuang's secret skill, superpower, and so on, and attack them indiscriminately. Rumble. As Jian Wushuang stepped on the air and rushed to Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog's side, the chaotic divine lightning that had already condensed and was about to strike Jian Wushuang split into three again. Its power did not weaken at all, and it turned toward Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog and struck them as well. "Damn it!" Long Qing growled as he looked at the incoming chaotic divine lightning. He had no choice but to raise his hand and block it. Supreme Green Dog quickly formed hand seals with both hands and used his supreme divine arts to resist the primal chaos divine lightning. Bang! 3 bolts of divine lightning struck down at the same time. Jian Wushuang took out the Wushu chaotic cauldron again, drew out the primordial chaotic qi, and hit the chaotic divine thunder. Boom, boom, boom. 3 earth-shaking sounds of collision rang out. After the 3 chaotic divine thunders, Jian Wushuang, Long Qing, and Supreme Green Dog were all heavily smashed. Jian Wushuang and Long Qing were better off. After all, one had chaotic Rulric body and the other was a dragon. Their bodies were at the top level of the universe. Other than their chi and blood boiling and their bodies exploding, their vitality was not severely damaged. As for Supreme Green Dog, he was in a miserable state. Countless secret techniques were directly destroyed by the lightning, and he spat out an endless amount of divine blood. His face instantly turned pale, and he was on the verge of collapsing. Crazy! This was a lunatic. Jian Wushuang wants to take us down with him. Supreme Green Dog's eyes were filled with anger as he roared. In the next moment, he turned around and was about to flee into the distance. Long Qing wiped away the faint golden blood from the corner of his mouth. After giving Jian Wushuang a death stare, he also fled. The chaos divine lightning was getting stronger and stronger. Who knew how powerful it would be if a few more bolts of chaos divine lightning came? When some supreme beings in the distance saw this scene, they trembled and quickly retreated, afraid that Jian Wushuang would drag a few people down with him before he died. You want to escape? Don't you want to see how we die? Why aren't you watching? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and sneered. He took a step forward and was about to chase after Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog. The primal chaos lightning tribulation was too terrifying, and he didn't even know if he could survive it. If he were to die in the tribulation, he might as well drag Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog down with him. Just as he was about to give chase, the ninth Kulpa King's voice suddenly rang in his mind. Jian Wushuang, this place is not far from the Divine Life Palace. Let's return to the Divine Life Palace quickly. What? Jian Wushuang's body trembled slightly. He turned to look at ninth Kulpa King and said, "What's wrong with the Divine Life Palace?" The ninth Kulpa King took a deep breath and replied in a deep voice, "Jian Wushuang, the Divine Life Palace is in grave danger now that the five forces are attacking it." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's right hand trembled. He looked deeply at Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog. He no longer chased after them. Instead, with a flash of his body, he flew toward the Divine Life Palace. The primal chaos tribulation lightning above his head also began to move. The ninth Kulpa King looked at the lightning tribulation above his head and Jian Wushuang, who was flying away quickly, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a smile. If this primal chaos lightning tribulation were to join the battle, it would definitely be a huge surprise, right? The next moment, the ninth Kulpa King did not hesitate at all. He took a step forward and also chased in the direction of the Divine Life Palace. In the distance, Supreme Green Dog, who was still in shock, and Long Qing, who had a gloomy expression, stood in the air. Long Qing, it seems like Jian Wushuang is planning to bring the lightning tribulation to the battlefield in the Divine Life Palace. What should we do? Supreme Green Dog asked with an unsightly expression. The Divine Life Palace was currently being attacked by the five great forces. The number of Supremes on the battlefield was probably more than his hands and feet combined. Once Jian Wushuang brought the primal chaos lightning tribulation, what kind of scene would it be? Dozens of supreme martial artists transcending their tribulations at the same time? Just thinking about it made Supreme Green Dog's scalp go numb. What else can we do? Let's go to the battlefield of the Divine Life Palace. Long Qing replied with a dark expression. At the same time, in the Divine Life Palace, many space cruisers stopped at the entrance of the Divine Life Palace. One could not see the end of it. Dozens of supreme martial artists stood on the deck with their hands behind their backs, not saying a word. Although they didn't speak, their powerful auras had already spread out to cover the sky and earth, enough to suffocate people. The leader was a young man with two horns on his head and white scales on his cheeks. He didn't appear to be very old, but everyone knew that this dragon tribe member known as Long Bai was actually an old freak who had lived through more than 1,000 chaos cycles. He was also the younger twin brother of Long Yi, the third-generation dragon clan member who had participated in the battle of the Divine Life Palace tens of thousands of years ago. Not long ago, he had broken through to become an invincible ruler and was now in charge of leading the dragon race to raise the Divine Life Palace. This is my first battle after breaking through to the invincible ruler level. I'll use this battle to make my name known throughout the universe. Long Bai's eyes flickered with excitement. He waved his right hand forward and sneered, "Kill!" In an instant, the dozen or so dragon tribe powerhouses behind him all transformed into their true forms and crashed toward the divine life palace. Beside him, Supreme Bing Yi, Scarlet Sun Demon Master, and the Blood Sky Hall Master also had a glint in their eyes. They led their disciples and charged toward the divine life palace. For a moment, the void in front of the divine life palace was filled with supremes and rulers of all levels. It was a dark mass that stretched as far as the eye could see. In this battle, the five forces had sent a total of more than 20 supremes. Among them, Long Bai had the highest cultivation and was an expert who had just entered the invincible supreme realm. Supreme Bing Yi and Scarlet Sun Demon Master were slightly inferior and were half-step invincible supremes. As for the Blood Sky Hall Master, he was a peak supreme. This lineup was not small, and it was not any weaker than the battle when the six great forces besieged the divine life palace. On the other hand, the divine life palace. Supreme Master Gai Fu was in a deep sleep, Supreme Master White Tiger was dead, and Supreme Giant Axe had only just recovered from his serious injuries. It was hard to say how much battle strength he had. At the entrance of the divine life palace, the Blood Wave Supreme, the Supreme Giant Axe, and the Heavenly Dipper Supreme were standing side by side. Behind them, 7 junior, middle, and advanced supreme martial artists followed closely. There were a total of 10 supreme martial artists. This was all the combat power that the Divine Life Palace could bring out at the moment. Lord Bloodwave, I just received news that Heiyu has already led Cosmos Temple to intercept the reinforcements from the Starry Sky Sword Sect. I'm afraid the Starry Sky Sword Sect won't be here anytime soon. An ordinary supreme martial artist said bitterly behind him. Lord Bloodwave, I just received a message from the 9 Thearchs Pavilion. The Great Sun Divine Kingdom, which has been saying that they will no longer participate in the war, has been blocked by the King of Days men outside the Universe Passage. The other ordinary supreme being said with an unsightly expression. The ruler Bloodwave fell silent upon hearing this. The 2 great reinforcements had been cut off. This time, the 6 great forces had schemed to completely destroy the Divine Life Palace. It could be said that the life force of the Divine Life Palace had been completely cut off. Only after a long time did the ruler Bloodwave take a deep breath. He turned to Supreme Heavenly Dipper and asked, Heavenly Dipper, how's the construction of the channel that connects the edge of the universe in the Divine Palace going? Supreme Heavenly Dipper nodded his head and replied in a deep voice, Bloodwave, that passage has been tested and is almost stable. It is enough to send the disciples of the Divine Palace to the edge of the universe. I have already sent people there to receive them. The ruler Bloodwave could not help but smile in relief upon hearing this. That's good. As long as they're still here, the roots of the Divine Life Palace will still be here. Sooner or later, they'll be able to return to us. The universe channel he mentioned was their last resort. Once the Divine Life Palace was broken, the universe channel would be able to accommodate any cultivator below the Supreme Being level. They would be able to leave the Divine Life Palace and be transported to the edge of the universe. Giant Axe, how's your situation? The Blood Wave Supreme turned to look at the Supreme Giant Axe beside him and asked worriedly. Ha ha ha! Blood Wave, you don't have to worry about me. Even if I die today, I won't let them have a good time. Supreme Giant Axe laughed and raised the giant axe in his hand. He didn't show the slightest fear and instead rushed into the sky. All right, the ruler Bloodwave also laughed heartily. Now that things had come to this, there were no more restraints and nothing to worry about. Giant Axe, Heavenly Dipper, we will fight to the death. Bang! Bloodwave took a heavy step forward and raised his head to look at the many supreme martial artists who were flying over in an overwhelming manner. His eyes were filled with a cold killing intent. Kill, die. Supreme Bloodwave spat out coldly. He pulled out a river of blood with his right hand and charged forward with unparalleled divine power. I will fight you to the death. Supreme Giant Axe roared and transformed into a giant that was 100,000 feet tall. Raising his heaven-splitting giant axe, he cleaved down at one of the dragon race supreme beings. Come on, just kill me. He let out a violent roar, and every step he took produced a muffled boom. The giant axe in his hand released a sharp axe light, like an ancient god that split the primordial chaos and dispersed all the clear and turbid air. He was about to split the world. Only fight to the death. Ruler Heavenly Dipper muttered to himself with a cold expression. He slowly pulled his right hand back, and a scarlet arrow automatically condensed on the sun-shooting bow. He aimed at a top supreme being and instantly shot. The 3 chief supremes of the Divine Life Palace had died. Behind the 3 of them, the 7 ordinary supreme martial artists also unleashed their strongest power and turned into several streams of light, charging toward the black mass of the Dragon Clan's alliance army. The battle had entered its most intense state from the very beginning. At the same time, in the Divine Life Palace, a dark light mirror that looked like a heavenly curtain was reflected in the sky above the Divine Life Palace. The mirror was broadcasting the battle outside the Divine Life Palace. All the disciples of the Divine Life Palace, including the river spirit of the Tao Comprehension River, were gathered under the dark light mirror. They clenched their fists tightly and stared at the mirror. The Divine Life Palace was their home. All right, little guys, quickly go into the passageway and prepare to teleport. A muffled voice was emitted. It was precisely Xianxia. Because he could not move, he could not participate in the war outside the Divine Palace. He was left behind to be in charge of the transportation of the disciples of the Divine Life Palace. At the same time, he was also the last obstacle in the Divine Life Palace, guarding the last gate for the palace. Once the ruler Bloodwave and the others fell, the Divine Life Palace would fall, and he would be the final line of defense here. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. However, the Divine Life Palace was silent. Not a single person left. They clenched their fists tightly and did not move an inch. What are you guys doing? Xianxia's voice became rough as he said. One of the disciples of the Divine Palace gritted his teeth and said, Supreme Martial Artist Xianxia, the Divine Life Palace is my home. Now that my home is gone, what's the point of me living? Not bad. Rather than living in secret, I would rather die. We are willing to live and die with the Divine Life Palace. For a moment, the Divine Life Palace was in high spirits, and their voices resounded through the sky and shook the earth. On top of a towering mountain, Supreme Xianxia's human face couldn't help but reveal a moved expression when he saw this scene. A warm current was flowing in his body. As the saying goes, when a tree falls, monkeys scatter, and when a great disaster strikes, they fly away on their own. How fortunate was the Divine Life Palace to have such a group of disciples who were willing to live and die together. The Divine Life Palace might not be the most powerful force in the universe, but it was far from comparable to other top forces. Taking in a deep breath, Supreme Xianxia's expression darkened as he berated, Don't mess around. The ruler Bloodwave and the others are using their lives to buy time for you. If you don't leave, won't their sacrifices be in vain? As his voice fell, Supreme Xianxia's tone became slightly gentler as he continued, Listen up, you are the root of the Divine Life Palace. As long as you don't die, even if the Divine Life Palace is destroyed today, I believe that you will come back one day and restore the Divine Palace. But if you die, the Divine Life Palace will really be destroyed. Toward the end, Supreme Martial Artist Xianxia's voice was like the voice of the Heavenly Duke striking the head, deafening even the deaf. As soon as he said that, the Divine Life Palace fell into a dead silence, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing. How could they not understand what Supreme Martial Artist Xianxia had said? Supreme Martial Artist Xianxia, just watch a little longer. We'll leave after a little longer. A female disciple of the Divine Palace bit her lower lip, her eyes full of reluctance. When Supreme Xianxia heard this, he could only sigh and agree to this request. Outside the Divine Life Palace. Ha ha ha! I Long Bai am destined to be famous in this battle. Long Bai's eyes flickered with excitement as he continued to command the experts on the battlefield to kill Supreme Bloodwave and the others. The Supremes of the Divine Life Palace were powerful, and because each of them was a special life form, they were able to unleash power several times stronger than those of the same realm. The Bloodwave Supreme went all out, suppressing Supreme Bing Yi with his attacks. As Supreme Giant Axe faced Scarlet Sun Demon Master, each of his axe strikes brought with it the power to split the sky, pressing Scarlet Sun Demon Master down. Heavenly Dipper Ruler was not to be outdone either. Every arrow he shot was able to accurately lock onto the Blood Sky Hall Master, who was moving erratically, forcing him to retreat time and time again. As for the 7 ordinary supreme martial artists, their strength far exceeded those of the same realm. They often fought 1 against 1, or even 3 against 1. However, even so, they were still being suppressed and pushed back. There was no other reason than the fact that too many experts had been mobilized this time. In addition to the 20-plus rulers, there were also hundreds, if not thousands, of ultimate rulers. They had all gathered together and formed a battle formation, each of them transforming into a war giant that, when combined, was no weaker than a ruler. An arrow at the end of its flight. Long Bai stuck out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth, shaking his head in disdain. He didn't need to do anything in this battle. He just needed to stand here quietly and watch over the battlefield. Blood Wave, we can't hold on much longer. Supreme Heavenly Dipper sent the Blood Sky Hall Master, who was about to kill an ordinary Supreme, flying with another arrow. He panted slightly as he transmitted his voice. As long as we can hold on. At least, we have to safely transfer all the disciples of the Divine Palace. Killing intent flickered in the ruler Blood Wave's eyes as the ground beneath his feet turned into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The terrifying power of laws suppressed Supreme Bing Yi. All right, I understand. Ruler Heavenly Dipper took a deep breath and said no more. Rumble. On the battlefield, destructive divine arts were used one after another, annihilating everything. Sword Chi, Saber Radiance, secret skills, and all sorts of other powers exploded. They were vast and boundless, like a scene of destruction. Time passed by slowly. After an ordinary supreme being from the Divine Life Palace was killed by a joint attack, the already precarious situation of the Divine Life Palace became even more dangerous. The 3 lead supremes, who had the upper hand, were besieged by the other supremes who had their hands free. The pressure on them increased, and the situation was reversed. Kill them all. Seeing this, Long Bai laughed cruelly. Bang! All the dragons transformed into their true forms and spat out their dragon pearls, annihilating everything. In an instant, the Divine Life Palace suffered more casualties. Let's die together. An ordinary supreme being, who was severely injured and on the verge of death, saw the 3 supreme beings charging toward him. A crazed look appeared in his eyes, and he suddenly chose to self-destruct. For a moment, the scene was extremely heroic. Bang! Bang! 2 more ordinary supreme beings from the Divine Life Palace chose to self-destruct, one after another. It was as if a sad song had been played. Go to hell! Supreme Giant Axe's chest was bleeding, and he went completely mad. With a deafening roar, he chopped 3 advanced supreme martial artists into pieces. As for Scarlet Sun Demon Master, he finally seized the opportunity. With a flash in his eyes, he struck Supreme Giant Axe with a supreme sacred art, almost tearing his divine body apart. Within the Divine Life Palace, many disciples of the Divine Life Palace could not help but look sad when they saw this. There were even some gentle female disciples who couldn't help but cry out. All right, you guys should go. Supreme Yen Shan's voice was hoarse. He knew that the ruler Blood Wave and the others wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. It was time for him to face the enemy. Many disciples fell silent upon hearing this. They turned around silently and walked toward the passageway that led to the edge of the universe. No matter how reluctant, angry, sad, and aggrieved they were, they knew that it was just as supreme martial artist Yen Shan had said. As long as they stayed, the Divine Life Palace would not be truly destroyed. They couldn't let the ruler Blood Wave and the others sacrifice themselves in vain. Pada pada. At this moment, their footsteps were as heavy as mountains. It was as if a stone was pressing on their chests, making it hard for them to breathe. Just as someone was about to step into the entrance of the passage, and almost everyone had turned around to face away from the dark light mirror, suddenly, a disciple of the Divine Palace seemed to have noticed something. He let out a soft gasp, then pointed at the dark light mirror and cried out in horror, "Look! What's that?" "What?" Hearing this, the crowd turned their heads in confusion and looked at the dark light mirror that the disciple of the divine palace had pointed to. At the edge of the battlefield, which was reflected by the dark light mirror, a cold-looking young man covered in mysterious runes, with purple-gold eyes and a head of black hair that reached his heels, was charging toward the battlefield while enduring the vast lightning tribulation. His speed was extremely fast, and every step he took covered a distance of 10,000 miles, like a thunderbolt between heaven and earth. His entire body emitted a dazzling golden light, as if he was an immortal god who had walked out from the 9 heavens. The next moment, he resolutely crashed into the turbulent battlefield with an extremely overbearing posture. Boom! 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 In an instant, countless terrifying black chaotic divine lightning bolts descended from the lightning tribulation, turning the entire battlefield of the divine life palace into a hell of lightning. This person is Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang is back. All of a sudden, the disciples of the divine life palace who were about to leave stopped in their tracks at the same time. Their bodies trembled violently, and there was an uproar. Outside the divine life palace, the battlefield was constantly changing, but in general, the situation was almost one-sided. Compared to the allied forces of the 4 sides, the 10 Supremes of the Divine Life Palace found it too difficult to deal with them. The Blood Wave Supreme, the Supreme Giant Axe, and the Heavenly Spirit Supreme, the 3 lead Supremes, had all suffered different degrees of injuries. They were holding on with their last breath. As for the other 7 ordinary Supremes, most of them had already been killed. There were only 4 Supremes left who were struggling to hold on. However, it was expected that they would fall sooner or later. Blood Wave Heavenly Dipper. I'm afraid I'll have to make a move. Supreme Giant Axe had just recovered from his serious injuries and had attracted most of the firepower on the battlefield. At this moment, his divine body, which was tens of thousands of feet tall, was full of cuts from knives and axes. His chest had been torn apart by Blood Sky Hall Master, and the black poison was burning his divine body, making it impossible for him to recover. Just as he was about to self-destruct, suddenly, a huge thunderous sound came from the distance. Then they saw a white light. At first, it was a small spot of light that was 1,000,000 miles away. But the next moment, it enlarged in everyone's eyes. What? Everyone noticed this scene, and their hands could not help but stop for a moment, looking over in confusion. Long Bai, who was in charge of the rear, also frowned and said, "Who is this?" He didn't have much time to think. Long Qing's angry voice exploded in his ears. "Third uncle, make them retreat." Eh? Long Qing. Long Bai didn't understand what Long Qing meant, but he knew that Long Qing wouldn't do anything without a reason, so he prepared to let the allied forces retreat first. However, just as he was about to speak, the lightning figure who was bathed in lightning and had tribulation luck above his head had already crashed into the crowd. "Let's cross the tribulation together." On the battlefield, some of the supreme martial artists still did not react in time and asked with a blank expression, "What's this?" The next moment, "This is a fucking lightning tribulation." One of the supreme martial artists cried out in horror as he turned around to escape. The other supreme martial artists were so frightened that their bodies trembled, and they also used secret techniques to turn around and escape. However, it was all too late. Boom, boom, boom. Dozens of chaotic divine lightning bolts, which had been condensed to the extreme, struck down. In an instant, the entire battlefield of Thunder God Palace turned into a pool of purgatory lightning. Ah, this is chaos lightning. Damn it, Jian Wushuang. That little thief is back. He even brought the lightning tribulation back with him. He's trying to drag us through the tribulation together. The entire Divine Life Palace battlefield was filled with cries of pain and the roars of the dragons. A primal lightning bolt struck down, and the formation giants formed by hundreds and thousands of ultimate rulers were instantly reduced to dust. A middle-grade supreme martial artist gathered all of his divine power and tried to resist the divine lightning. However, After the divine lightning struck him, he was also annihilated and couldn't be more dead. The scene was extremely spectacular. The chaotic divine lightning tribulation above Jian Wushuang thought that these supremes were helpers that Jian Wushuang had invited. It was furious and split into dozens of terrifying chaotic divine lightning bolts, striking down fiercely. Countless Hundun lightning bolts as thick as a human's waist fell like heavy cannonballs, bombarding the area. The Blood Wave Supreme and the others, who had heard the news and retreated earlier, stood at the edge of the lightning tribulation and watched this scene in shock. They were petrified. Jian Wushuang, this little guy, brought back the lightning tribulation? The ruler Bloodwave said in a daze. This is chaos lightning. They're finished. Supreme Giant Axe gasped for breath and laughed heartily. Boom, boom, boom. After a wave of lightning tribulation, less than 10% of the people on the battlefield survived. Except for some advanced supreme martial artists and top supreme martial artists with strong physical bodies, the rest had all died. The originally dark and dense battlefield suddenly became 2 or 3 lonely kittens. Even those who were lucky enough to survive were in an extremely miserable state. Their bodies were charred black and their hair was disheveled. The lightning tribulation isn't over yet. Quickly run. An advanced Supreme Master was so terrified that he couldn't care less about flattening the Divine Life Palace. Seeing the lightning tribulation above Jian Wushuang's head start to gather its power again, he was so scared that his soul left his body and he wanted to leave. However, just as he walked out of the tribulation lightning zone, the first tribulation, the great destruction, the second tribulation, the great suppression seal, the third tribulation, the great yellow spring seal, the 9th tribulation, the great sky seal, an ice-cold voice exploded. The 9th Culpa King, dressed in a white robe stained with blood, came from the other side. A total of 9 rays of light that blotted out the sky and covered the sun, carrying all kinds of strange phenomena, rolled over in a mighty manner. They crossed the sun and the moon, cut off the sky, and directly cut off all escape routes. Many supreme martial artists who wanted to escape were killed one after another. Jian Wushuang and 9th Culpa King, one was responsible for leading the lightning tribulation and the other was responsible for supplementing the damage from the back. Although they did not communicate, they cooperated with great tacit understanding. As soon as the 2 of them appeared, they instantly swept across the entire battlefield and killed the Dragon Clan's alliance army. Bang! When the last chaotic divine lightning fell, the battlefield in the Divine Life Palace fell into a dead silence. 1,000,000 miles of the void turned into nothingness. On the side of the Allied forces, except for Supreme Bing Yi, Scarlet Sun Demon Master, the Blood Sky Hall Master, and a few other top-tier Supremes, everyone else was gone. A gust of wind with the smell of blood reverberated in the air. Long Bai looked at this scene in a daze, his heart dripping blood, and his whole body trembling. No, what? Just like this? All gone? Roar! In the next moment, Long Bai's eyes widened as he roared madly. This was the first war that he led, and it was also a war that he thought would make a name for himself and shake the universe. However, everything turned into nothingness. Jian Wushuang, you should die. Long Bai's eyes were wide open and he stared at Jian Wushuang with hatred. Third uncle, Long Qing, what did you tell me before? You said that Jian Wushuang was nothing but a clay chicken and pottery dog. He wasn't an opponent you could defeat with a snap of your fingers. You had to kill him. This is what you meant by must kill? Senior Long Bai. At this moment, Long Qing and Supreme Green Dog arrived. Long Qing, what did you tell me before? You said that Jian Wushuang was nothing but a clay chicken and pottery dog. He wasn't an opponent you could defeat with a snap of your fingers. You had to kill him. This is what you meant by must kill? Why didn't you tell me that he was coming with the lightning tribulation? Long Bai opened his big hands and grabbed Long Qing's collar tightly, squeezing these words out from between his teeth. Long Qing's heart trembled when he saw Long Bai's ashen face, which was on the verge of exploding with rage. Third uncle, didn't I just tell you? Long Qing lowered his head and replied in a daze. Long Bai glared at Long Qing. his chest heaving with anger. After a long time, he took a deep breath, pushed Long Qing forward, and released his hand, saying, "Long Qing, I'll settle this score with you later." After saying that, he turned to Jian Wushuang and said with killing intent in his eyes, "Jian Wushuang destroyed many disciples of the Dragon Clan. He should be cut into pieces." Bang! The next moment, he stomped his right foot heavily and turned into a stream of light. He stretched out his sharp dragon claws and grabbed Jian Wushuang's head. A second ago he was still far away, and his body was still in a charging position. In the next moment, he appeared directly above Jian Wushuang's head. At the center of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang gasped for breath. His chaotic, domineering body was full of crisscrossing marks left by the thunderbolts. It was ferocious and eye-catching. Fortunately, he managed to arrive at the battlefield of the Divine Life Palace at the last moment by burning his divine power and using the secret skill of dragon blood. He raised his head and looked at Supreme Blood Wave and the others in the distance. Although their auras were weak and they were all injured, they were fortunately not dead. Seeing this, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. "Jian Wushuang, I'll take your life." At that moment, Jian Wushuang's eyelids twitched as he felt a huge pressure suddenly descend. A white dragon with a ferocious expression was rapidly shuttling through the starry sky. Just his power alone had surpassed everyone else. An invincible ruler. Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he saw this. The ruler Blood Wave and the others, who weren't too far away, also noticed this and their expressions changed. Not good. Jian Wushuang is in danger. The Blood Wave Supreme Giant Axe, and the others immediately stepped forward and rushed toward Jian Wushuang to stop Long Bai. Supreme Heavenly Dipper's eyes turned cold as he knocked an arrow on his bow and released his most powerful arrow, which was drawn by his blood essence. But, get lost for this seat. Long Bai's expression was malevolent. With a rip of his right hand, he sent the Blood Wave Supreme and Supreme Giant Axe, who had come to intercept him, coughing up blood as they retreated. The arrow shot by Supreme Tianji only left a small black dot on Long Bai's body before it shattered. This was Long Bai's furious attack, and it was also an attack of an invincible ruler. It was not something they could resist. With one blow, the three lead supreme martial artists were all defeated. Fortunately, it bought Jian Wushuang a breath's time. Jian Wushuang raised his head to look at the thundercloud, which had finished gathering power and was about to strike with chaotic divine lightning again. Then, he pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword and directly used the Eternal Night Sword move to drag Long Bai into the Eternal Night Kingdom. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, two explosions were heard. The first explosion was Long Bai tearing the Eternal Night Kingdom to pieces. The second explosion was the Primal Chaos Divine Lightning striking down. Boom! The chaotic divine thunder split into two, each as thick as a bucket. One of them went for Jian Wushuang and the other for Long Bai. This chaos lightning might be good enough to deal with others, but it's not enough to deal with an invincible ruler like me. Long Bai stepped out of the Eternal Night Kingdom and looked at the Hundun lightning that was charging at him like the whip of the thunder god. He let out a long roar and released a terrifying sound wave that did not seem human. Rings of sound waves spread out from his mouth and formed a whistling sound, shattering the Hundun lightning. Wushu Chaotic Cauldron. What Jian Wushuang was facing was much more difficult. Whoosh! The Wushu Chaos Cauldron shot up from his sleeve and attacked the sky. Countless primordial chaos power spread out from the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron and turned into a black ball of light, hitting the chaotic divine lightning. Boom! 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 Countless violent thunderbolts exploded and smashed onto the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron. Suddenly, the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron let out a wail and returned to Jian Wushuang's hand. The chaos divine lightning was getting stronger and stronger. After such a long time, its power had become extremely terrifying. The Wushu Chaotic Cauldron was incomplete, and it was not an extreme weapon for defense or attack. It could not stop the chaos divine lightning at all. The next moment, under the furious gazes of Supreme Blood Wave and the others, the lightning tribulation and Long Bai's furious attacks landed on Jian Wushuang one after another. Clang! Jian Wushuang's chaotic domineering body, which was enshrouded in blazing golden flames, first let out a crisp sound like a gong. Then the entire domineering body exploded and broke into countless pieces. This was the first time that Jian Wushuang's divine body had been destroyed since he had achieved chaotic domineering body. Hoochie hoochie hoochie. After 3 breaths, Jian Wushuang's chaotic domineering body was condensed again. However, his face had turned sallow and he was on the verge of falling from the sky. Oh, Overlord body? Looks like you're related to the Overlord tribe. What a great opportunity. Long Bai narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint appeared in his eyes. He then sneered contemptuously and said, "But so what if it's an Overlord body? No one can stop me from killing you today. Even if the white ape, the old ancestor of the tyrants, were to come, it would have to step aside obediently." After that, Long Bai stretched out his dragon claw again and grabbed at Jian Wushuang. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank and his heart sank. In the end, at this moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out in the void. "You, try saying that again?" The next moment, a burly figure covered in white hair, shining like the sun, landed in front of Jian Wushuang. His face was expressionless as he casually threw out a punch. It carried the vast power of the universe and directly sent Long Bai's claw flying. His aura was similar to Jian Wushuang's, but he was much stronger, the tyrant's old ancestor. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's body trembled and his face revealed a look of disbelief. Immediately, a few more voices sounded from the horizon. "Alliance Master, the Overlord is late. Please forgive him." A figure rushed over from the horizon with surging chi and blood. It was the Overlord who had broken through to the Supreme Being level at the Great Clan Gathering. "Alliance Master, 9-Star Holy Land is late. Please forgive us." On the other side, the 9-Star Saint, who had joined the Sword Union with the Overlord on the ancient path of stars. His white robe was fluttering in the wind. Although he hadn't broken through to the Supreme Being realm, he was much stronger than when he was on the ancient path of stars. Behind him, several people from 9-Star Holy Land followed, including Supreme-level old experts. "Alliance Master, the Maluo clan is late. Please forgive us." A rough voice was heard. Then, a wild giant with 2 sharp, curved horns on his head, and a body burning with demonic flames, led the people of the Maluo clan and strode over. After not seeing him for tens of thousands of years, the young clan leader of the Maluo clan, Yengu, had also broken through to the ruler realm. Further away, Lord Bloodsword, How Jean am here. A chubby yellow-robed cultivator scrambled over, leading dozens of ultimate rulers behind him. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang was touched and a warm current flowed through his body. The core members of the Sword Union he had established on the ancient path of stars had all come. Long Bai's face instantly darkened to the extreme. Ignoring the Overlord and the others, he glared at the old ancestor of the tyrants and said in a hoarse voice, "White ape, you've chosen to come out of the world?" The tyrant's old ancestor was expressionless when he heard that and could not be bothered to answer him. Instead, he said indifferently, "Long Bai, didn't you just say that even if this old man was here, you'd still have to step aside obediently?" As he paused, an endless chill appeared in the eyes of the old patriarch of the tyrants. Then he said, "If you dare to say it again, this old master will kill you right now and take you back to make dragon head soup. Do you believe me or not?" Overbearing. When the tyrant's old patriarch finished speaking, an extremely overbearing and biting cold aura spread out, and the entire place fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the tyrant's old ancestor in a daze. Their expressions were frozen to the extreme. Long Bai clenched his fists tightly, his snow-white eyes crazily shrinking, and his face turned ashen. He did not doubt the words of the tyrant's old ancestor at all. This lunatic had always been lawless and would do anything. I believe you." Finally, Long Bai squeezed out these words with great difficulty. When the tyrant's old ancestor heard that, he laughed in disdain and said, "Long Bai, you're far worse than your brother, Long Yi." As soon as these words fell, Long Bai's face became even more unsightly. Long Yi had always been stronger than Long Bai in the Dragon Clan. Although they were brothers, it was a knot in Long Bai's heart. The reason why he had taken the initiative to challenge Long Yi and raise the Divine Life Palace was to prove that he was more capable than Long Yi. After all, Long Ye's last attempt to flatten the Divine Life Palace had ended in failure. Taking a deep breath, Long Bai first looked at Jian Wushuang and then at the white ape. He groaned and said, "White ape, are you sure you want to protect Jian Wushuang? To tell you the truth, Jian Wushuang is already on the Dragon Clan's must-kill list. You can't protect him alone. Even if I, Long Bai, retreat today, there will be other Dragon Tribe powerhouses coming to visit soon. If you really anger our Dragon Tribe, it's not impossible for the second generation's distant ancestor-level Dragon Emperors to wake up and come to visit in person. At that time, what can you, the white ape, use to stop me?" The expression of the tyrant's old ancestor did not change at all when he heard this. He replied indifferently, "Long Bai, you talk too much. It seems like you really want to become Dragon Head Soup." "You!" Hearing this, Long Bai's face immediately turned ashen again. A towering rage was burning in his chest. He was the third generation of the Dragon Clan and an invincible ruler. When had he ever been humiliated like this in public? If his reason had not told him that he was far from being the opponent of the tyrant's patriarch, he would have long been unable to hold back the killing intent in his heart and fought the tyrant's patriarch to the death. "White ape, I admit defeat this time." After taking a deep breath, Long Bai turned around and left. He looked at Long Qing, who was standing at the side in a daze. He glared at him and scolded, "Trash! Do you still want to stay here and embarrass yourself?" With that, he stood up and turned into a huge white dragon. After letting out a dragon's roar, his figure shuttled through the void and left the place. Long Qing first looked at Jian Wushuang unwillingly, then at the tyrant's old ancestor. He shuddered. This was a peerless and ruthless man who had threatened to beat his third uncle Long Bai down to make Dragon Head Soup. He couldn't afford to offend him. Whoosh! His figure also disappeared on the spot. Supreme Green Dog, on the other hand, was not so lucky. He lowered his head and pretended that no one had seen him. Just as he was about to sneak away, he saw the ninth Kulpa King standing behind him. He pressed his shoulder and said in a faint voice, "Where do you want to go?" His entire body stiffened. There was silence on the battlefield of the Divine Life Palace. Only the lightning tribulation above Jian Wushuang's head continued to make loud rumbles, as if it was preparing for a destructive attack. The others looked at Jian Wushuang from a distance and their hearts were in their throats. The tyrant's old master raised his head and squinted his eyes to look at the lightning tribulation. He then shook his head and said, "There are a total of 18 lightning tribulations and each one is more dangerous than the previous one. The last one is the total power of all the previous lightning tribulations. I'm afraid Jian Wushuang will not be able to survive it." Under the lightning tribulation, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged with a serious expression. Long Bai and the others had left. The crisis of the Divine Life Palace could be considered resolved. However, Jian Wushuang's crisis had just begun. He had a premonition that this would be the last lightning tribulation, and also the most powerful one. He wasn't sure if he could pass it. Crackling. Within the thunderclouds, countless lightning snakes shuttled. A series of loud drum-like sounds constantly exploded from the thunderclouds, making people's hearts palpitate. The Overlord, the Nine Stars Saint, and the others trembled and turned pale just by feeling the pressure of the lightning tribulation. This wasn't divine lightning. This was a world-ending catastrophe. Boom! 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 The entire sky above the Divine Life Palace was filled with rolling dark clouds. The sky covered the sun and extinguished all light. Roar! Finally, the last bolt of tribulation lightning was formed. All of a sudden, the entire universe was filled with rumbling sounds, as if an ancient brass bell was ringing. The dragon skin drum was beating, and a vast and majestic pressure swept in all directions. The universe seemed to have fallen into chaos. Kacha! A black divine lightning bolt that was 100 zhong wide suddenly descended, This black divine lightning had countless branches spreading out, and it was also derived from the heavenly Tao. It was as if the heavens were enraged and would not rest until one of them was dead. They're here. This is the last bolt of chaos lightning tribulation? It's too terrifying. How can there be such a powerful lightning tribulation in this world? In an instant, a huge wave was set off in the hearts of countless people as they lost their voices in shock. Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked at the black divine thunder. His pupils shrank. Before the lightning tribulation even landed, the biting cold aura of the lightning had already caused tens of thousands of cracks to appear on his divine body. Break! At this life and death moment, Jian Wushuang's heart suddenly surged with a crazed intent to die, and his face became ferocious. Sundering stars. With the tarot divine sword in his hand, he slashed at the black divine lightning. A 10,000-foot-long blue sword light instantly shot out from Jian Wushuang's hand. With an unparalleled sharp sword chi, it collided with the black divine thunder. This sword was enough to split open the heavenly gates and shake Kunlun. Bang! A loud explosion was heard. Then, the blue sword radiance shattered inch by inch and turned into dust. The black divine lightning struck down again without any hindrance. Its power didn't decrease at all. The crowd was shocked by the scene. They knew that Jian Wushuang had to cross the lightning tribulation by himself, and no one could help him. Once Jian Wushuang passed it, he would have a meteoric rise and stand at the peak of the universe. If Jian Wushuang couldn't, he would die and everything would return to nothingness. Come! Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth. He knew that Guangguang could not stop the chaotic divine lightning with her own divine power. The chaos divine lightning was too powerful. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang flipped his right hand again, and the Wuxia divine sword appeared in his hand. Old friend, I'm counting on you this time. Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with heartache. The Wuxia divine sword had accompanied him in his battles in the universe and had been undefeated. It had long been his closest companion. The Wuxia divine sword seemed to have sensed something as well, and it let out a sword cry that pierced the 9 heavens. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's black hair flew in the air. He raised his head and stared at the vast lightning tribulation. He shouted, "Explode!" Bang! In an instant, the Wuxia divine sword soared into the sky, accompanied by a sharp sword radiance that shook the 9 heavens and 10 lands. It ruthlessly collided with the Hundun divine lightning. Boom! With a loud bang, the entire Wuxia divine sword exploded. The Wuxia divine sword was a universe-limit true treasure, and its self-destruction was no weaker than the self-destruction of a top-tier supreme being. Bang! A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky. The Wuxia divine sword shattered into pieces after releasing its final brilliance, disappearing into the world. As for the chaos divine lightning, its power finally decreased slightly. My old friend. Jian Wushuang felt something sweet in his throat. He spat out divine blood and his body shook. The Wuxia divine sword had accompanied him in his campaigns and beheaded countless enemy chieftains for him. It had long formed a heart-to-heart connection with him. When it self-destructed, he immediately felt the same backlash. Again, suppressing the surging blood qi in his divine body, Jian Wushuang raised his head again to look at the chaotic divine thunder and shouted, "Explode! Explode! Explode!" All of a sudden, countless treasures rushed out of Jian Wushuang's interspatial ring to meet the chaotic divine thunder. In the past few years, Jian Wushuang had swept through the Tarot ruins, dominated the ancient path of stars, and swept through the desolate areas of the universe. The number of supreme beings he had killed could be counted on 2 hands. After these people died, all kinds of divine medicines, divine materials, and top-tier treasures in their interspatial rings fell into Jian Wushuang's hands. This was a shocking number. Bang, bang, bang. These top-tier true treasures gathered into a long dragon and crashed toward the chaotic divine lightning. Then they kept exploding. Among them, there was also young Master Qingmu's limit true treasure, the divine demon halberd, and Supreme Green River's 7-star demonic blade. The most valuable item was the nine-clawed dark fish shield that Jian Wushuang had obtained from the clan leader of the nine-clawed demonic octopus clan, who was an advanced supreme being, in the desolate area of the universe. Rumble. In an instant, hundreds of universe treasures of different grades exploded. An earth-shaking explosion suddenly erupted. No words could describe the power of these hundreds of ultimate treasures exploding at the same time. At this moment, the entire universe was speechless. No one could hear the discussion, only the continuous rumbling. In front of them, a wave of white waves rose up and spread out, destroying the surrounding space. Countless specks of dust floated into the air, filling their vision. In the midst of the white waves, a much dimmer and thinner lightning tribulation pierced through the white waves and shot toward Jian Wushuang. The self-destruction of so many supreme treasures still couldn't stop the chaos divine lightning. Instantly, the surrounding people couldn't help but exclaim, "This lightning tribulation is unprecedented," as expected of the Lord Alliance leader. Even the lightning tribulation he summoned is much stronger than ours. Other than the tyrant's old ancestor, who among everyone here can claim that they can withstand this lightning tribulation with a 100% success rate? This lightning tribulation is too strong, but Jian Wushuang is stronger. If we were to face this lightning tribulation, I'm afraid we would have given up long ago, right? Walala. The last lightning tribulation broke through the clouds and fog, sweeping away all the evil spirits in the world. It was constantly magnified in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Although its power had been greatly diminished by the self-destruction of many ultimate treasures, the divine lightning that was nearly 1,000 feet wide had also become as thick as a bowl. However, to Jian Wushuang it was still a fatal threat. Continue. Blood trickled from the corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth. Under the power of the explosion of hundreds of true treasures, the shock wave also affected him and his divine body was close to being crushed. Go! He threw out the Wushu chaotic cauldron again to collide with the black lightning. Then, he stomped on the ground, put away his sword, and rushed into the sky. He was going to take this divine lightning head-on for the last time to reach the ultimate sublimation. Clang! The Wushu chaos cauldron crashed into the black lightning with unparalleled chaos power. The black lightning was instantly slowed down and its power was reduced. The Wushu chaos cauldron flew backward after letting out a wail. As the Wushu chaotic cauldron was sent flying, Jian Wushuang finally collided with the black divine thunder. Roar! The Hundun divine lightning let out a deafening roar. Break! Jian Wushuang's face was ferocious and his eyes were filled with madness. If he didn't become a devil, he wouldn't live. Today, either the lightning tribulation would be destroyed, or he would die. Bang! Jian Wushuang's body emitted a bright golden light. His 5 fingers were wrapped in raging flames, and the divine patterns on his body lit up continuously, especially the purple Chuan character between his brows, which became as demonic as blood. With his purple gold eyes, he really looked like a god. At that moment, heaven and earth seemed to have been split into two. On one side, Jian Wushuang was covered in dazzling golden light, and on the other side, the entire starry sky was plunged into the dark divine thunder of lightning tribulation. The two forces continued to collide with each other like two semi-spherical light shields wrestling with each other. The black thunderbolts hit Jian Wushuang's divine body like snakes, and then entered his body. The violent power kept tearing his divine body apart. The excruciating pain made Jian Wushuang scream. However, Jian Wushuang did not retreat. Instead, the madness in his eyes grew stronger. He knew that those who couldn't kill him would make him stronger. Crackling, silver snakes danced and dark clouds covered the city. The area within 1,000 feet of Jian Wushuang turned into a terrifying pool of lightning. His entire body was bathed in lightning, as if he was a sinful son who was being punished by lightning. In the distance, the ruler Bloodwave and the others watched this scene without blinking. Jian Wushuang, you must hold on. Otherwise, all your efforts will be in vain. The others also clenched their fists. Jian Wushuang, hang in there. Bang, bang, bang. The branches on the chaotic divine lightning spread out again and turned into countless small divine thunders, which bombarded Jian Wushuang. Divine blood flowed out of Jian Wushuang's mouth and nose, making him look like a bloody man. He raised his head and looked at the lightning tribulation. Instead of being afraid, he laughed wildly. "Don't you just want me to die? Come on. Let's see who will die first." At that moment, in Jian Wushuang's eyes, the lightning tribulation was no longer the lightning tribulation, but a wild monster that wanted to kill him. Thump! Jian Wushuang took a step forward and his body soared into the sky again. With a deep and grim laugh, he rushed directly into the depths of the thick thunderclouds. "Come, just kill me." The next moment, one after another, explosions came from the thunderclouds. No one knew what had happened in the thunderclouds. After the time for half an incense stick to burn, the thunderclouds slowly began to dissipate. Seeing this, everyone's heart tightened, and doubts welled up in their hearts. "Jian Wushuang, did you make it through in the end? How is it? Did Jian Wushuang survive? Hurry up. Let's see how Jian Wushuang is doing." "Lord Alliance Leader." Everyone looked at each other, then flew up and rushed toward the thunderclouds that had yet to completely dissipate. Before they could reach the thunderclouds, a beam of bright light suddenly shot out from the thick dark clouds. Just like the first ray of sunlight in the morning, it pierced through the imprisonment of darkness and brought light back to the earth. Chi chi chi. Immediately, more and more beams of light appeared. In the end, the bright light tore all the dark clouds apart. The entire sky was dyed gold by the glow of the setting sun, just like the sunset by the sea, magnificent to the extreme. Above the ninth heaven, Jian Wushuang was wrapped in a golden light ball. His broken divine body began to recover at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. He closed his eyes slightly and spread his arms, as if he was hugging heaven and earth. The bright light also dyed every strand of his skin and hair golden. His originally delicate and ordinary appearance, under the multicolored light, also appeared as handsome as a god. The next moment, the stars trembled, and the world changed. Endless celestial light sprinkled down from the sky, as if the chaos had broken at dawn at the beginning of the world, and the chi activity surged. Above the sky, the great path played music for him, and the earth trembled. It was as if they were all congratulating him on his breakthrough to the supreme level. "Today I, Jian Wushuang, have achieved the supreme Tao." An indifferent voice was heard and Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes. In his purple gold eyes, countless divine patterns derived from the great path flowed, and his entire person exuded a sacred aura. All the divine power in his body was mobilized and transformed into the divine power of the supreme great Tao. His indestructible, chaotic, domineering body also began to grow stronger inch by inch. His head of black hair became as black as ink. Boom, boom, boom. With Jian Wushuang as the center, waves of powerful aura burst out continuously. This aura was mixed with the charm of his perfect chaotic life form. In an instant, a feeling that made all races submit spontaneously arose. So powerful. It's too terrifying. I have a feeling that Jian Wushuang can crush me to death easily. Countless disciples of the Sword Union were shocked to the extreme when they saw this scene. They were even more shocked when they felt the aura on Jian Wushuang. However, the more they thought about it, the more they looked at Jian Wushuang with fanatical admiration. In their dazzled eyes, Jian Wushuang was like a god who controlled the life and death of the world. He had walked out of the ancient chaos and once again ruled the world. This included the Blood Wave Supreme, the Nine Tribulation Lord, the Supreme Giant Axe, and the others. Their eyes were also filled with deep shock. The aura of Jian Wushuang. Even I feel like there's a dagger on my back. I feel a sense of danger. Supreme Giant Axe took a deep breath and said in shock. Supreme Blood Wave stood beside him and looked at Jian Wushuang. He laughed and said, Giant Axe. He's no longer the little fellow who needs our protection. After a pause, the ruler Blood Wave smiled and continued. He's grown up now. He's a giant arm that can truly take charge of everything on his own. Supreme Giant Axe couldn't help but be startled when he heard this. He then laughed and sighed. Yeah, time really flies. In the past, Jian Wushuang was only a ruler of the third level and needed their protection. But now, Jian Wushuang had unknowingly become a behemoth that could shake the universe and save the Divine Life Palace from its imminent collapse. The ninth Kulpa King's face, which had always been cold, also showed a smile that he himself did not notice. How do you expect me to fight you? There were not many people in his life that he, the ninth Kulpa King, could look up to. Jian Wushuang was one of them, and the only one who made him feel inferior for the first time was Jian Wushuang. Above the 9 heavens, among the clouds, Jian Wushuang stood in the void, his black hair flying. Wisps of golden light gushed into his body. The divine ruler realm had been formed. Jian Wushuang could not help but smile as he felt the power in his body that was completely different from before. Is this the power of a ruler god? He clenched his fist. He was more than 1,000 times stronger than before. A terrifying power that he had never felt before flowed in his body. It was a vast power that transcended all life and set foot on the peak of the universe. Knowing that there were still people waiting for him, Jian Wushuang did not waste any time. After familiarizing himself with the power in his body, he took a step forward and walked toward the crowd. His body didn't seem to move at all, and he appeared in front of the ruler Bloodwave and the others. It wasn't until several breaths later that the afterimages formed by the high speed of the sky slowly dissipated. Supreme Bloodwave, Supreme Giant Axe, Supreme Heavenly Dipper. Jian Wushuang greeted them with a nod. The Bloodwave Supreme looked at Jian Wushuang and opened his mouth to say something. However, in the end, all the words that he had already prepared were condensed into one word. "All right," he said. He patted Jian Wushuang's shoulder, and his eyes were full of gratification and admiration. Jian Wushuang did not say much either. The relationship between the two of them was that of a teacher and a friend. Could no longer be explained by warm words. After that, Jian Wushuang led Supreme Bloodwave and the others toward the Tyrant's Patriarch. Many thanks for Senior White Ape's rescue. Jian Wushuang first saluted the Tyrant's Patriarch respectfully. He had been greatly indebted to the Tyrant's Patriarch. Not only had the latter saved his life, but he had also saved the entire Divine Life Palace. The ruler Bloodwave and the others also wore solemn expressions. They cupped their hands and said, "We are extremely grateful to Senior White Ape. Logically speaking, the old master of the Tyrants had saved them. In terms of strength, the old master of the Tyrants was an existence whose cultivation base far exceeded theirs, so they naturally had to be respectful. No need for formalities." The Tyrant's old ancestor clasped his hands behind his back and shook his head. He muttered, "Speaking of which, I'm an old friend of the Palace Master of the Divine Life Palace. He helped me once, and I'm just returning the favor this time." When the ruler Bloodwave and the others heard this, their eyes narrowed. They exchanged a glance and asked respectfully, "Senior White Ape, do you know our Palace Master?" "We're all from the same era, of course I know him." The Tyrant Patriarch nodded. Hearing this, the ruler Bloodwave and the others became excited. They suppressed their emotions and asked, "Then, Senior White Ape, do you know where our Palace Master is now? How's the situation?" When the Tyrant's old ancestor heard this, he first narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself for a moment. Then he sighed softly and said, "Your Palace Master is trapped in that place. I'm afraid the situation is not good. He won't be able to come back in a short time." "Is that so?" The ruler Bloodwave and the others were slightly stunned. They seemed to have thought of something and were somewhat dazed. Jian Wushuang did not say anything and just listened quietly. He had always been curious about who the Palace Lord of the Divine Life Palace was and why he had not appeared. Now that he had heard the discussion between the Tyrant's old ancestor and Supreme Bloodwave, he immediately understood that the Palace Lord of the Divine Life Palace seemed to be trapped in some place and could not come out. After a while, Jian Wushuang introduced the people from Sword Union to Supreme Bloodwave and the others. This time, more than half of the Sword Association's people had come. According to the Overlord, some disciples from the Sword Association who were far away were on their way. Naturally, Jian Wushuang would not be negligent. He first thanked him and then discussed with Supreme Bloodwave to invite everyone who came to the rescue to the Divine Life Palace and hold a big banquet as a thank you gift. When Jian Wushuang said that, the overlord Moro Yengu, ruler Hao Jin, and the others naturally had no choice but to follow his orders respectfully. On the other hand, the old patriarch shook his head in refusal after some thought and turned to leave. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but feel a little regretful, but he wouldn't force it. After a period of time together, he could be considered to have understood some of the personality of the tyrant's patriarch. He was free and easy, didn't like to be restrained, and was a loner. Supreme Bloodwave arranged for the people of the Sword Union to enter the Divine Life Palace. At the same time, he sent Supreme Giant Axe and Supreme Heavenly Dipper to the universe passages of the Nine Emperor Pavilion and the Starry Sky Sword Sect to see if they could cooperate with these two great powers and retain the Great Sun Emperor God and Supreme Black Feather. At the same time, it was also an invitation to the Starry Sky Sword Sect and the Nine Emperor Pavilion. After making the necessary arrangements, the ruler Bloodwave led everyone into the Divine Life Palace. Within the Divine Life Palace, the disciples of the Divine Life Palace, who had been watching the Dark Light Mirror and the battlefield, had been waiting for this. When they saw that the Bloodwave Master, Jian Wushuang, and the others had returned, they immediately cheered. The ruler Bloodwave. The disciples of the Divine Life Palace greeted the ruler Bloodwave one after another, but most of them looked at Jian Wushuang. This is Senior Brother Jian Wushuang. Senior Brother Jian Wushuang is so powerful. Some new disciples who had just entered the Divine Life Palace and had never seen Jian Wushuang before looked at him with admiration. Jian Wushuang greeted them with a smile. He immediately saw many familiar faces in the crowd of the Divine Life Palace. For example, the demonic wind ruler that he had once argued with had also broken through to the unparalleled ruler level after nearly 100,000 years. His aura was restrained, and his eyes were ancient. He was much calmer than before. The river spirit of the Tao Comprehension River was also grinning from ear to ear when he saw Jian Wushuang. Jian Wu, forget it. I'll forgive you. Good job. Jian Wushuang stretched out his hand and pinched the face of the river spirit of the Enlightenment River. The river spirit was so angry that he glared at him. The ruler Bloodwave felt a surge of warmth in his heart upon seeing this. This was the Divine Life Palace, everyone's home. The disciples of the Divine Life Palace naturally did not have to leave after the calamity. Under the arrangement of Supreme Bloodwave, they returned to their posts. As for Supreme Yen Shan, he took a deep look at Jian Wushuang before he turned back into a mountain. 3 months later, the banquet was held. The Divine Life Palace was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and it was a jubilant atmosphere. Now that the palace master of the Divine Life Palace had disappeared and Supreme Gaifu was in deep sleep, Supreme Bloodwave was in charge of commanding the Divine Life Palace. Supreme Giant Axe and Heavenly Dipper Supreme, who were in charge of welcoming the Starry Sky Sword Sect and the Nine Emperor Pavilion, had already returned. Behind them were Heartslayer and Red Ear Supreme from the Nine Emperor Pavilion, as well as the Starry Sky Sword Sect's Martial Sword Immortal. It was a pity that when Supreme Black Feather and King of Day heard that they had been defeated in the Divine Life Palace, they fled without hesitation. As a result, Supreme Giant Axe and the others were unable to keep them. Jian Wushuang and Master Heartslayer were old friends, so they naturally exchanged pleasantries. At the banquet, everyone was talking and laughing. When the mood was at its peak, a big matter was settled. After today's banquet, the Divine Life Palace, the Starry Sky Sword Sect, the Nine Emperor Pavilion, and the Overlord Body Clan had formed an alliance. From then on, they would support each other and advance and retreat together. There was no oath between them because the core of the alliance was Jian Wushuang. As long as Jian Wushuang was not dead, the alliance would last forever. At the banquet, Jian Wushuang felt a pair of beautiful eyes staring at him. He couldn't help but sigh. He greeted the owner of the pair of beautiful eyes, Martial Sword Immortal. Jian Wushuang greets Lord Martial Sword Immortal. Jian Wushuang respected the Martial Sword Immortal. There were not many Supremes in the universe, let alone female Supremes. It was not easy for the Martial Sword Immortal to become an invincible ruler, stand at the top of the universe, break the galaxy with her sword, and control and orthodoxy as a woman. Yes, the martial sword Immortal nodded. She was tall and had sharp facial features. Her hair was tied up with a platinum jade hairpin, giving off an extremely capable and valiant feeling. It's really good. She sized up Jian Wushuang and then said indifferently. As an invincible ruler who had entered the Tao with the sword, the martial sword Immortal's horizons were naturally not low. She could tell at a glance that Jian Wushuang's aura was concealed and his comprehension of sword principle was very high, even not much behind her. Lord Martial Sword Immortal is too kind. Jian Wushuang nodded. He knew that Martial Sword Immortal wouldn't just talk to him out of courtesy. Indeed, after Martial Sword Immortal pondered for a moment, she finally said, Jian Wushuang, can you let me see the Tarot Divine Sword? The Tarot Divine Sword? Hearing this, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He had heard a little about the history between the Martial Sword Immortal and Tarot Supreme. Therefore, he did not hesitate and nodded. All right, he said. Then, Jian Wushuang took out the Tarot Divine Sword and handed it to Martial Sword Immortal. The Martial Sword Immortal looked at the Tarot Divine Sword. Her heart, which had never changed for 10,000 years, suddenly trembled as a look of reminiscence appeared in her eyes. It was as if the azure-robed Tarot Swordmaster, who had once dominated the universe, had returned. Tarot, she said. The Martial Sword Immortal's 5 slender fingers gently stroked the Tarot Divine Sword's blade, somewhat intoxicated. After a long time, she came back to her senses and returned the Tarot Sword to Jian Wushuang. She said softly, Thank you. Pausing for a moment, Martial Sword Immortal took a deep breath. With a flip of her right hand, a golden scabbard appeared in her hand. Jian Wushuang, you are the inheritor of Supreme Tarot. This item should belong to you. What is this? Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank. He suddenly realized that after the scabbard appeared, the Tarot Divine Sword suddenly trembled slightly, trying to break free from Jian Wushuang's hand and enter the scabbard. Kacha! With a clear ring, the Tarot Divine Sword shot into the golden sheath. In an instant, a muffled sound rang out from the scabbard. A sense of perfection was felt, as if the Tarot Divine Sword and the scabbard were one. The Martial Sword Immortal smiled and said, Jian Wushuang, the world only knows about the Tarot Sword. They don't know about the Tarot Scabbard. Only when the Tarot Divine Sword has the Tarot Scabbard can it be truly invincible. Is that so? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and said, What do you mean? Please tell me. The Martial Sword Immortal pondered for a moment before saying, Jian Wushuang, have you ever heard of an extreme weapon? An extreme weapon? Jian Wushuang thought for a while and replied, I've heard a thing or two about it, but I don't know much about it. Martial Sword Immortal explained, The true name of the extreme weapons should be the extreme ancestral weapons. They are the 7 strongest weapons that appeared when the universe was born at the beginning of chaos. They are powerful enough to suppress the universe. These 7 supreme ancestral weapons have different functions. For example, your Wushu Chaos Cauldron is one of the 7 supreme ancestral weapons, and it's mainly used for creation. The Tarot Sword was also one of the 7 supreme great ancestral weapons, and it was mainly used for killing. However, it was precisely because the Tarot Divine Sword was in charge of killing that it had the most violent personality among the 7 supreme great ancestral weapons. If it was not careful, it could easily devour its host and demonize them. The Tarot Scabbard was one with the Tarot Divine Sword, so it could suppress and nurture the Tarot Divine Sword. As long as it has the Tarot Scabbard, the Tarot Sword will be able to continue to grow and become stronger. After Martial Sword Immortal finished speaking, she saw that Jian Wushuang still looked like he did not understand. She shook her head and laughed. Jian Wushuang, you might not understand the power of the Tarot Sword sheath now, but you will know in the future. All right, I came to the Divine Life Palace today to see you and the Tarot Divine Sword. Now that my wish has been fulfilled, I'll take my leave. With that, Martial Sword Immortal bade farewell to the ruler Bloodwave and rode her flying sword away. Like a small boat, she sailed into the starry sea. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed with a touch of deep thought. holding the hilt of the tarot divine sword that was exposed. He felt a sense of connection from his mind. He could feel that the trace of evil intent Supreme Tarot had left on the tarot divine sword was finally being gradually cleared away, and it was gradually returning to its purest and most perfect state. Time slowly passed, and the 3-day banquet finally came to an end. This banquet not only settled the alliance between the Divine Life Palace, the Tyrants, and the 9 Emperor Pavilion, but also promoted 2 new lead Supreme Masters. The 6th Supreme Martial Artist, the 9th Culpa King, the 7th Supreme Master Jian Wushuang. The entire Divine Life Palace had no objection to this. Originally, the Chief Supreme of the Divine Life Palace could only be assumed by a top Supreme. However, although the 9th Culpa King was only a middle Supreme, he definitely had the battle strength of a top Supreme or even stronger. As for Jian Wushuang, there was no need to talk about him. When he was still an ultimate ruler, he was able to kill an advanced Supreme. Now that he had proven his Supreme Great Tao and completely unlocked the Tarot Divine Sword, it was obvious that Jian Wushuang was now extremely powerful. The Divine Life Palace was filled with congratulatory voices. It was night. The moon was high up in the sky, and the stars were shining. On a mountain peak in the 6th mountain range of the Divine Life Palace, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged, and his whole body seemed to be one with the full moon beside the mountain peak. At first glance, he looked like an immortal who was untainted by the mortal world. Behind him, the overlord stood respectfully. Ever since Jian Wushuang had defeated everyone and broken through to the supreme level, he had completely given up on him. In the beginning, he had been betting on the fact that Jian Wushuang would have great achievements in the future, and that he would benefit himself and the entire Overlord body clan. But now, he was sure that Jian Wushuang would become a giant arm of the universe in the future. Alliance Master, do we need to bring Madame Wushuang over? The Overlord said in a deep voice. Jian Wushuang thought for a while and shook his head. No, I don't think so. Let Shuang stay with the white ape for now. I'll pick her up personally after I've completely resolved the turmoil. When Jian Wushuang said the word turbulence, a cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. Hearing this, the Overlord was shocked. He took a deep breath and said, Alliance Master, are you planning to attack the Dragon Tribe? Jian Wushuang nodded and then shook his head. The Dragon Clan is a towering tree with deep roots. It's not that easy to destroy. Such a good dish naturally has to be placed at the end. As for the Great Sun Divine Kingdom and the Great Void Temple, of course it's time to settle old scores. Jian Wushuang's tone suddenly turned cold. Jian Wushuang, had never taken the initiative to bully others in his life. However, the Great Void Temple and the other major forces had taken advantage of him and bullied him again and again. Jian Wushuang, had long decided to kill him. Then, Alliance Master, when should we make our move? The Overlord asked. Jian Wushuang thought for a moment and replied, I haven't completely stabilized my ruler realm yet. Let's talk about this after I've completely stabilized my divine ruler realm. Yes. The Overlord nodded and said, Alliance Master, I'll take my leave first. I'll make preparations with Yengu and the 9 Stars Saint. Not long after, the Overlord respectfully retreated. On the desolate mountain peak, only the bright moon and Jian Wushuang were left. Jian Wushuang sat down cross-legged and with a flip of his right hand, the Tarot Sword Manual appeared in his hand. Now that he had broken through to the Supreme Being realm, the 3 remaining sword forms of the Zenith Sword Manual were no longer restricted and could be read and learned. The first move of the Tarot Sword Canon was called Eternal Night, and the second move was called Dawn. The 2 moves seemed to have no connection, but they were closely linked. The third move was called Dusk. The heroes were in their twilight, and the gods were in their twilight. This move was a sword that could slay gods. In Jian Wushuang's eyes, the scene of the sun setting in the west appeared. In this scene, a green-robed sword god opened the heaven's gate with his sword. His vast sword chi shook Kuan Luan, rolled the dragon wall, and annihilated all the supreme beings in the sky. Without much hesitation, Jian Wushuang continued to flip to the 4th move. The 4th move of the Tarot Sword Canon, for seasons. As its name suggested, This tarot sword manual was called the fourth move of the four seasons. It contained the four sword intents of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. There was the biting cold of winter, the continuous flow of spring, the violent and dry heat of summer, and the desolation and bleakness of autumn. Compared to the first three moves, the conception of the single sword of four seasons was much more profound. It was so obscure and complicated that even Jian Wushuang found it difficult to comprehend it. This made Jian Wushuang sigh with emotion. Tarot Supreme was indeed the #1 sword master since ancient times. His talent in sword principle was probably no less than Jian Wushuang. If I really want to catch up to the Tarot Swordmaster, I'll have to at least become an advanced supreme martial artist. Jian Wushuang shook his head. After carefully comprehending the four seasons sword move, he took a deep breath and finally turned to the last page of the Tarot Sword Manual. The fifth form, Tarot. Tarot. This was the last move of the Tarot Sword Manual, and it was named after the Tarot Supremacy. One could imagine how domineering it was. This sword technique was created by Supreme Tarot in his later years. It was also the Tarot Swordmaster's greatest reliance in suppressing the universe and the 10,000 races. This sword contained all of the comprehensions he had gained from the supreme, invincible sword Tao of Tarot. It was the culmination of all of his comprehensions in his life. If I'm invincible, who else but me can do it? What a bold move! Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered and he took a deep breath. Immediately, Jian Wushuang's thoughts sank into the Tarot sword move. The next moment, the scene in front of Jian Wushuang suddenly changed. The bright moon on the mountain peak disappeared, and the strong wind disappeared. He seemed to have fallen into a virtual space. In front of him, a green-robed figure stood with his back to him and his hands behind his back. Tarot supremacy? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and asked, "My successor, you've finally turned to the last page." The green-robed figure said in a low voice as he slowly turned around. He had a handsome face, a long and thin face, and sharp eyes. This was none other than the azure-robed sword god from 300 chaos cycles ago. Ruler Zenith Tarot. "I've been waiting for you for a long time." He sized up Jian Wushuang and said. Jian Wushuang also sized him up. The person in front of him was naturally not the real Tarot Supreme. If he guessed correctly, the current Tarot Supreme should be the mark he had left in the Tarot Sword Manual before he died. "Come on, little guy. Let me see how strong you are as my successor." The Tarot ruler spoke indifferently, and a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. A long sword condensed from divine power was held in his hand. "All right," he said. Jian Wushuang nodded and his eyes were filled with excitement. He also condensed a long sword in his hand. He had long since been entranced by this man, who had dominated the universe for thousands of chaos cycles before perishing 300 chaos cycles ago. He wished he could be born in the same era as him so that he could fight him. And now this opportunity was finally placed in front of him. Hence, a battle that transcended time and space had begun. Bang! With a single step, Supreme Tarot disappeared. In the next moment, he appeared behind Jian Wushuang and stabbed at him with his sword. So fast! Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank. But his reaction was not slow either. Without turning his head, he had already stabbed his sword back diagonally to block the stab. "Your sword is too slow," Supreme Tarot said coldly as he swung his right leg like a giant axe and hit Jian Wushuang's waist. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's body fell, and the huge force from his waist made him take a few steps forward. Before he could come to his senses, Tarot Supreme's figure flashed again and he appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang looked up and saw a black sword light growing bigger and bigger in his eyes. In the end, it slashed his body. His consciousness collapsed. After a long time, Jian Wushuang's consciousness finally recovered in the virtual space. With his hands behind his back and his back facing Jian Wushuang, Supreme Tarot said in a deep voice, "My successor, on the path of the way of the sword, the stronger the divine art, the stronger the way of the sword. Even the most basic stabbing, slashing, and cutting techniques can be unleashed to their maximum power when they are trained to the extreme. As long as it's a killing technique, it's a killing sword. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang fell into deep thought. When he was fighting with Taro Supreme, Taro had not used any powerful sword techniques. He had defeated him with just a stab and a slash. He didn't even have the chance to use his sword Dao sacred art. Gradually, Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed with enlightenment. Clang! At this moment, Supreme Taro once again charged forward with his sword in hand. "Don't be distracted when you're fighting an enemy," Supreme Taro said coldly. His entire body turned into a green afterimage, and his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already slashed out thousands of swords. "Come!" Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with fighting intent. He also took a step forward and his divine power exploded as he charged toward Taro Ruler. Ding ding ding. The two of them exchanged hundreds of moves in an instant, after the time for one incense stick to burn. Daybreak. Taro Supreme suddenly turned into a ray of golden light and dashed forward, killing Jian Wushuang. The way of the sword lies in the combination of moves, and how to kill the enemy in the fastest and most convenient way. Do you understand? Time slowly passed. From the outside world, Jian Wushuang seemed to have turned into a statue, sitting cross-legged on the mountain peak without moving. In fact, Jian Wushuang was immersed in the Taro space, fighting with Taro Supreme day and night. After all, Taro supremacy had lived for thousands of chaos cycles and stood at the peak of the universe. In terms of comprehension of sword principle, he was much more profound than Jian Wushuang. One had only trained for 700,000 years, while the other had trained for thousands of chaos cycles. There was simply no way to compare the two. As the two of them fought, Jian Wushuang was like a sponge, madly absorbing the comprehension of sword principle of Zenith Heaven. Jian Wushuang's realm of sword principle started to improve at a speed visible to the naked eye. Taro Supreme was like a golden sparring partner, constantly helping Jian Wushuang grow. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. In the blink of an eye, 5,000 years had passed in the trial space. In the past 5,000 years, Jian Wushuang had never stopped fighting with Taro Ruler. He had been killed by Taro Ruler 7,869 times. Gradually, Jian Wushuang's power changed from being unable to fight back to being able to contend with Taro Supreme. In the blink of an eye, another 5,000 years had passed. In these 5,000 years, Jian Wushuang had grown to the point where he could fight with Taro Ruler without being at a disadvantage. Moreover, as time passed, the victory was leaning toward Jian Wushuang. If the outside world knew about this, it would probably set off another storm in the universe. In just 10,000 years, Jian Wushuang had managed to catch up to several thousand chaos cycles of Supreme Taro's comprehension of the Sword Dao. What kind of terrifying learning talent and growth speed was this? Clang! Supreme Taro turned into a green shadow, while Jian Wushuang turned into a black light. The speed of the two was extremely fast, and they kept flashing and colliding in the void, leaving countless afterimages. The sword light flickered, and the sword shadows intertwined with each other. Supreme Taro and Jian Wushuang were both suffused with soaring sword chi, which was extremely sharp. The two of them exchanged thousands of blows in an instant, and the long swords in their hands sparked. Daybreak! Supreme Taro shouted coldly and suddenly became one with the sword. He turned into a ray of golden light that broke the dawn and rushed toward Jian Wushuang like a lightning that tore through the night. Sundering stars! Jian Wushuang's black hair flew in the air as he slashed out a ray of blue sword light. Bang! This sword firmly locked on to Taro Ruler and slashed down, causing Taro Ruler's Dawnbreak sword light to slow down slightly. The next moment, daybreak! Jian Wushuang's right foot stomped heavily, and he also turned into a daybreak sword radiance, charging toward the Taro Swordmaster. Bang! A huge shock wave exploded as the Taro Swordmaster and Jian Wushuang's long swords collided. The strong wind blew their hair up. Their eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Kacha kacha kacha. Then, the sword in the Taro Swordmaster's hand started to shatter. A satisfied smile slowly appeared on his handsome face. My successor, if you have the chance in the future, please kill a man named Emperor Devour for me. After Taro Supreme took a deep look at Jian Wushuang, his figure gradually disappeared and turned into black smoke. Then, the black smoke entered Jian Wushuang's forehead like a black line. The fifth move of the Tarot Sword Manual. Tarot. It was reflected in Jian Wushuang's mind. Kachuk. The virtual space continued to shatter. Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes and a sharp sword light flashed in his eyes. The strong wind on the mountain peak was still surging, and the full moon beside it was still bright. To Jian Wushuang, he had already stayed in the virtual space for more than 10,000 years, but to the outside world, it was only half an incense's time. I've gained a lot this time. Jian Wushuang couldn't help sighing. Through these 10,000 years of training and teaching, he had not only mastered the 5 sword techniques of the Tarot Sword Manual, but he had also completely comprehended the Tarot Sword technique. He had even strengthened his foundation. He had defeated Supreme Tarot in the virtual space, which meant that he was stronger than Supreme Tarot when he was an elementary Supreme. This did not include Jian Wushuang's other skills, such as chaotic domineering body and special life forms. To Jian Wushuang, it was an epic enhancement. The cold night wind blew Jian Wushuang's long hair. After a while, Jian Wushuang lowered his head and a thoughtful look flashed in his eyes. Emperor Devouring. According to what Tarot Supreme had said, if Jian Wushuang was not wrong, this man named Emperor Devouring was most likely the main culprit who had indirectly or directly caused Tarot Supreme's death. It must be known that when Tarot Supreme had been a top-tier Supreme, he had been able to sweep across the universe and suppress all races with the Tarot Sword and his extremely terrifying Sword Dao divine abilities. He was no weaker than an invincible Supreme, and he could even kill some of them. There might be rare individuals in the universe who could defeat Supreme Tarot, but there were almost none who could kill him and destroy the Tarot Divine Kingdom. If there was such a person in the universe, it was impossible for Jian Wushuang not to know. After all, it had only been 300 chaos cycles since ruler Zenith had fallen. It wasn't that far away. Who is this devouring emperor? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He was sure that he had never heard of this person. However, when he was in 9 Phoenix Star area, he was chased by a group of mysterious supreme martial artists and almost lost his life. Those mysterious supremes were called Devour 7 and Devour 5. After a while, Jian Wushuang shook his head. Since he couldn't figure it out, he simply didn't think about it. Fine. If I meet the Devouring Emperor in the future and defeat him, I'll kill him for you. Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. Jian Wushuang was in no hurry to leave. Instead, he reported to the Blood Wave Supreme and announced that he was going to go into seclusion again. He had comprehended far too many things in this 10,000-year battle with Tarot supremacy. He needed to carefully sort them out and thoroughly integrate them. Time flew by and another 5,000 years passed. The universe gradually returned to peace. The 5 great powers, including the Great Void Temple, the Blood Sky Hall, and the Scarlet Sun Divine Kingdom, seemed to have truly ceased all activities and did not mention anything about Jian Wushuang. As for the most powerful dragon race, which had once dominated the universe, they did not come out to cause trouble for a while and fell into a state of silence. The entire universe was a picture of peace. 5,000 years later, the Divine Life Palace returned to its former state. The 6th mountain range was Jian Wushuang's manor. After he became the 7th Supreme, it had been transformed into a supreme mansion. Creak. Suddenly, the gate of the manor, which had been locked for 5,000 years, was slowly pushed open by a fair hand. A cold-looking young man with purple-golden eyes, who was wearing a long robe with golden edges and had a sword hanging on his waist, walked out of the manor step by step. We pay our respects to Supreme Ruler Peerless. At the entrance of the manor, 2 disciples of the Divine Life Palace were stunned to see Jian Wushuang. Then they quickly bowed and greeted him. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly at them as a greeting. Then he took a step forward and turned into a soaring sword light, shooting toward the Supreme Shrine. Hoochie hoochie. The strong wind in the air passed by Jian Wushuang's face quickly. Now that everything is ready, it's time to settle the old scores. Jian Wushuang's purple-gold pupils were cold. In these 5,000 miles, he had finally mastered the 5 heaven-connecting divine abilities of the Zenith Sword Codex and stabilized his supremacy stage. Jian Wushuang, who was already terrifyingly strong, had his strength increased by another level. After a while, they arrived at the Supreme Shrine. It had only been 5,000 years, and the Supreme Shrine had not changed much. Only Supreme Bloodwave seemed to have known that Jian Wushuang had come out of seclusion and was sitting quietly in the main seat of the Supreme Shrine, waiting. Ruler Bloodwave. Jian Wushuang took a step forward and nodded at the Bloodwave Master. Jian Wushuang has completely stabilized his supremacy stage, right? The ruler Bloodwave asked with a smile. I didn't fail you. Jian Wushuang replied with a smile. The two of them chatted for a while before the Bloodwave Supreme suddenly sighed and asked, Jian Wushuang, I know why you are here. Are you ready to attack the 6 forces? There was nothing to hide. Jian Wushuang nodded and replied frankly, That's right. It's time to settle the old scores with them. The Bloodwave Supreme looked at Jian Wushuang deeply and asked again, Jian Wushuang, are you really ready? Jian Wushuang replied with a He was not confident to deal with the other forces except for the Dragon Clan. Even if they had any trump cards, Jian Wushuang was confident that they would not pose a fatal threat to him. That's good. The Blood Wave Master smiled in relief. Although he did not know how powerful Jian Wushuang had become, he knew Jian Wushuang's character. If he was not 80% confident, Jian Wushuang would not take such a risk. After thinking for a moment, the ruler Bloodwave muttered, Jian Wushuang, I don't think the Divine Life Palace can provide you with any help when you attack the 6 forces. Jian Wushuang nodded. This was within his expectations. After 2 great battles, the Divine Life Palace had lost many Supremes. There were many things that needed to be done, and they could no longer withstand any more turmoil. Moreover, Jian Wushuang didn't intend to drag anyone down with him, including the Sword Union. Here, Jian Wushuang. This is the information I've collected on the 6 forces for you. Take a look at it later. With a flip of his right hand, the Blood Wave Supreme took out a jade cylinder and handed it to Jian Wushuang. He then said, Jian Wushuang, I suggest you attack Blood Sky Hall first. Blood Sky Palace is not only the weakest among the 6 forces, but it also has a shallow foundation. The strongest person is the Master of Blood Sky Palace, who is a top-tier Supreme. Blood Sky Palace? Alright, I'll consider it. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look. The two of them exchanged pleasantries for a while before Jian Wushuang put on a bamboo hat and left the Divine Life Palace. In the universe, stars flickered and it was vast and boundless. Among them, there was a group of small planets in the depths of the universe. There were thousands of stars of various sizes in this group of small planets. All kinds of people from all walks of life and extremely evil people were gathered in this group of small planets. Therefore, this minor planetary system was also known as the Sin Starfield. The Blood Sky Palace was built in Sin Starfield. Among the top powers of the universe, the Blood Sky Palace was not considered strong. Firstly, the highest cultivation in the entire power was only the Blood Sky Palace Master, who was a top Supreme. Secondly, the Blood Sky Palace had a shallow foundation and had not been passed down for generations. It lacked a solid foundation. However, the Blood Sky Hall was definitely the most difficult force to deal with. They were like venomous snakes that lived in the dark corners. Once they targeted someone, they would be like gangrene attached to the bone, never stopping until one of them died. Therefore, very few people in the universe were willing to provoke these bugs. In the depths of Sin Starfield, there was a hall built on top of the poison mist swamp. Hall Master. This is the fresh blood food that has just been offered. There was no light in the hall. It was quiet and gloomy. A black-robed man walked into the hall and spoke to the throne hidden in the depths of the hall. A hoarse and tired voice came from the depths of the hall. Let out the blood food. Yes. The black-robed man nodded respectfully. With a flip of his right hand, a dark iron cage appeared in the hall. Dozens of ultimate rulers were locked up in the cage like animals, their faces filled with panic. Where is this place? Quickly let me out. My master is Supreme Nanming of the Nanming Galaxy. Let me go now. Otherwise, you won't have a good time when my master comes to you. I beg you, please let me go. All of a sudden, curses and pleas for mercy sounded one after another. However, the more they shouted, the more uneasy they felt. The next moment, a ray of blood light suddenly shot out from the depths of the hall, and then rolled back, rolling the entire dark steel cage in. Poochie, poochie, poochie. Countless muffled sounds and shrill cries rang out in the hall. A moment later, the shrill cries stopped, and a middle-aged man with an evil appearance walked out from the depths of the hall. He was the Blood Sky Palace Master, the Blood Sky Supreme. Blood 7, the quality of the recent blood food isn't that good. The Blood Sky Supreme's lips were a little red. He licked the corner of his mouth and looked at the black-robed man as he spoke in a hoarse voice. The black-robed man laughed bitterly and replied, "Hall Master, all the talented young ones in Sin Starfield have been eaten up. If we want to find new food, I'm afraid we'll have to leave Sin Starfield." Jiang Qin said. The Blood Sky Supreme waved his hand and said, "Then forget it." The black-robed man nodded, then asked with concern, "Hall Master, how's your recovery? How is it?" The Blood Sky Hall Master's eyes flashed with hatred when he heard this. He had tried to kill Jian Wushuang twice. The first time, Jian Wushuang had been saved by the tyrant's patriarch, but he had also been hit by the latter's punch. Although the old ancestor of the tyrants had just casually thrown out that punch and did not carry any killing intent, his divine body had still crumbled from the impact and he was seriously injured. After that, when his injuries were almost fully recovered, he participated in the battle to flatten the Divine Life Palace. First, he fought against Supreme Giant Axe and was forced to retreat. Then, he was bombarded by Jian Wushuang's chaotic divine lightning, which caused his injuries to worsen. If he had not left in time, he would have been in danger of dying that day. If that wasn't the case, he wouldn't be relying on a few ultimate rulers as food to speed up his blood demon body's recovery. Damn Jian Wushuang! At the thought of this, Blood Sky Supreme became even more resentful and wanted to skin Jian Wushuang alive. "Jian Wushuang, just you wait. Sooner or later I will turn you into blood food. I will eat your flesh and sleep on your skin." After taking a deep breath, the Blood Sky ruler's resentment gradually dissipated. He gathered his thoughts and asked the black-robed man, "Blood 7, have there been any strange happenings in the Divine Life Palace recently?" The black-robed man replied, "Hall Master, the universe has been peaceful in recent years. The Divine Life Palace has been recuperating, and Jian Wushuang has not made any moves. He should still be in the Divine Life Palace, consolidating his supremacy stage." "Okay, that's good." The Blood Sky ruler heaved a sigh of relief. He was now in an extremely weak state, and his battle strength had fallen many times from his peak. He was afraid that Jian Wushuang would take advantage of this time to cause him trouble. The entire universe was well aware of Jian Wushuang's talent and power. Although he had just broken through to the elementary supreme realm, many people in the universe had classified his power as that of an advanced supreme. Some people even bragged that Jian Wushuang already had the battle strength of a top supreme. "Humph, when I recover, I'll be able to break through to half-step unparalleled supreme. By then, I'll kill Jian Wushuang no matter where I go." The Blood Sky ruler snorted. "I'm about to break through." The black-robed man, Blood 7, was overjoyed when he heard this. He quickly knelt down and congratulated. "Then, I shall congratulate the Hall Master first. I wish the Hall Master to rule the universe for generations to come." The Blood Sky Supreme laughed and patted Blood 7's head. He said, "Blood 7, seeing how loyal you've always been, I promise you that as long as you follow me obediently, you'll be treated well in the future." Before he finished his words, an extremely cold voice suddenly exploded. "Die with you!" Bang! In the next moment, the door of Blood Sky Palace cracked open, and a cold-looking young man wearing a bamboo hat, a black robe, and a sword at his waist walked in. "Who are you?" "Jian Wushuang." Instantly, the smile on the Blood Sky Supreme's face froze, and his scalp went numb. Blood 7 did not react for a moment and was stunned on the spot. "Blood Sky Ruler, long time no see." Jian Wushuang's mouth curved into a cold smile as he spoke. "Jian Wushuang, what are you doing here? What about the Scarlet Guard? Where are the Blood Lord and Blood Marquis?" It was only now that Blood 7 reacted and screamed. He clearly remembered that there were many Scarlet Guard guards outside Blood Sky Palace, and the two Vice Palace Masters, Blood Lord and Blood Marquis, were in charge of the entire situation. The two Deputy Palace Masters were both middle-grade Supremes. How could Jian Wushuang walk into the Blood Sky Palace without a sound? The Blood Sky Supreme didn't say anything, but his expression was extremely ugly. He knew without a doubt that the two Vice Hall Masters, Scarlet Guard and Blood Lord, who were in charge of guarding Blood Sky Hall, had been killed by Jian Wushuang. As for why it was so silent, it could only prove that Jian Wushuang's strength was far above them. Jian Wushuang, what are you doing? The Blood Sky Supreme looked at Jian Wushuang gloomily and said coldly. Jian Wushuang didn't answer, but took off his cloak and let his black hair roll up. Then he said with a faint smile, Blood Sky, you seem to be very weak right now. The Blood Sky Supreme snorted and narrowed his eyes. Jian Wushuang, it seems like you want to kill me? At the same time, he slowly began to accumulate Shen power. Blood Sky, I was only an ultimate ruler back then. You saw that I was weak, so you bullied me again and again. You even wanted to flatten the Divine Life Palace. Jian Wushuang said slowly. Hearing this, the Blood Sky Supreme sneered and said, Jian Wushuang, this universe is the law of the jungle. Don't you understand this? Back then, you were weak, so you naturally deserved to be bullied. Who can you blame? Shaking his head in disdain, the Blood Sky Supreme continued, Jian Wushuang, I'll tell you the truth. I hate myself for not killing you earlier. I let a stray dog like you become so powerful. Is that so? Jian Wushuang nodded and then smiled. Blood Sky, you treated me like an ant that you could crush later. Now you are also an ant in my eyes. Bang! As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Wushuang stomped his right foot and instantly shattered the entire Blood Sky Palace into pieces. Then, like a cannonball, he charged toward the Blood Sky ruler. He didn't even draw his sword. Just the surging qi and blood from his body was enough to shake the entire place. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang appeared above Xianxia ruler. He clenched his right hand into a fist, which glowed with a golden light. It was as if he was pushing a golden chariot, and he smashed it toward Xianxia ruler's head. Jian Wushuang, do you really think that you can sweep across the universe just because you've broken through to the supreme level? The Blood Sky Supreme grinned hideously as a curved white sickle appeared in his hand. Go to hell! A large amount of supreme divine power gushed out from Xianxia ruler's hand and poured into the demon scythe in his hand. Then, he slashed it down at Jian Wushuang like a cold moon. There was a layer of purple venom on the blade of the demonic scythe. It was enough to corrode and melt an advanced supreme being. Even a top-tier supreme being would be severely injured if they were touched by it. Clang! However, a terrifying scene happened. The indestructible white demonic scythe didn't even break Jian Wushuang's chaotic domineering body. Instead, it left a long trail of sparks. How is this possible? The Blood Sky Supreme was shocked. Why is it impossible? Jian Wushuang sneered. Chaotic domineering body was the #1 divine body in all of eternity. When he was still the ultimate ruler, he had sent a middle supreme flying with one punch and then fought against chaotic divine lightning. One could see how powerful it was from this. After experiencing the baptism of the lightning tribulation and breaking through to the supreme being realm, not only did his cultivation level improve greatly, but the strength of his chaotic divine body also rose. If the Blood Sky Supreme was still in his peak state, he would not be so arrogant. However, the Blood Sky Supreme was still injured, and it was already good enough that he could use half of his strength. How could he hurt him? Clay chickens and pottery dogs. Boom! Jian Wushuang's punch was like a head-on cannon, piercing through the Blood Sky ruler's chest. The remaining power of this punch caused the ground within 10,000 miles to shake violently, as if a terrifying earthquake had occurred. In an instant, the Blood Sky Supreme's face, which had recovered its red color, turned pale. He stared at Jian Wushuang and was shocked to the extreme. This kid is already freakishly strong. I'm afraid he's invincible among the top supreme beings. In an instant, thoughts ran wild in the Blood Sky Supreme's mind. He pushed the dazed Blood 7 in front of him. Help me block Jian Wushuang. The next moment, Supreme Blood Sky took a deep breath, turned around, and fled. Hall Master. In an instant, Blood 7 looked at Jian Wushuang, who was charging toward him, and his whole body shivered. He was so scared that his liver and guts were torn apart. Jian Wushuang, it's not my fault. His lips trembled violently, and a glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes. He was a middle supreme, but he could not even think of resisting Jian Wushuang. None of your business? Jian Wushuang was expressionless, and he said in a cold voice, "When you slaughtered the disciples of the Divine Life Palace, did you ever think that it was none of their business? When you chased me to the desolate area of the universe, did you ever think that it wasn't your fault?" The purple Chuan character between Jian Wushuang's eyebrows was faintly visible, and his purple-gold eyes were filled with a cold, killing intent. Bang! Then, Jian Wushuang stretched out his right hand, and the sharp sword qi between his 5 fingers was like a snake twining around him. He slapped Blood 7 into powder. After doing all this, Jian Wushuang raised his head and saw that the Blood Sky ruler had already turned into a red light and was flying in a certain direction. You can't escape. Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent. He took a step forward, turned into a flowing light, and quickly chased after the Blood Sky ruler. The chase and escape immediately alarmed the entire Sin starfield. There were tens of thousands of cultivators living in the cluster of asteroids. When they noticed this scene, they all looked up and were shocked to the extreme. Look! The Blood Sky ruler is being chased. What? Who can hunt down the Blood Sky ruler? That person seems to be Jian Wushuang. In an instant, the 2 words Jian Wushuang were like a heavy bomb thrown into the crowd. The entire asteroid group was in an uproar. The Blood Sky Supreme was a top supreme in the past. In this small planetary group, he was the overlord who controlled the power of life and death. Everyone's respect and fear for him had long been engraved in their bones. They had not expected that Jian Wushuang, who had just broken through to the Supreme Being realm, could actually force the Blood Sky Supreme to flee in panic. Go! Let's catch up and see. Hurry, hurry, hurry! At that moment, countless people looked at each other and rushed into the sky. They turned into flowing lights and chased after Jian Wushuang and the Blood Sky ruler. Damn it! The Blood Sky Supreme looked at Jian Wushuang, who was pulling further and further away from him, and could not help but grit his teeth. His divine body, which was already overwhelmed, was on the verge of breaking. Jian Wushuang, you forced me to do this. The Blood Sky Supreme took a deep breath and seemed to have made a decision. A pained look flashed in his eyes. He suddenly changed his direction and rushed toward a blood-red planet not far away. There was a scarlet blood pool that was extremely evil. Gulp. The pool of blood was like boiling water, constantly producing fist-sized blood bubbles. As it bobbed up and down, one could vaguely see countless broken limbs and heads with ashen faces and wide eyes in the pool. Poochie! The next moment, the Blood Sky Supreme dashed into the blood pool like a sharp arrow. Boom! The Blood Sky Supreme's body gradually sank into the depths of the blood pool and disappeared. What? Jian Wushuang, who was chasing after them, stopped in the void and looked down at the blood pool. Gulu. Bubbles continuously emerged from the depths of the blood pool. Soon after, the entire blood pool began to spin, and a foul smell assailed his nose. You're just pretending. Jian Wushuang was expressionless. He clenched his right hand into a fist and countless golden lights flickered. It was as if a sun was hanging on his fist, and he punched at the blood pool. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion was heard. Immediately after, the entire blood pool shook violently and broke into pieces. Under this punch, the world seemed to be overturned. The sun and the moon seemed to be broken. The crowd who followed closely to watch the show only felt an extremely strong pressure being released from Jian Wushuang's right fist. The charging figures seemed to have hit a piece of transparent glass and were forcibly stopped. In the blood pool, blood water burst out. In the blood water, a red light was extremely fast. It was holding a crescent sickle with a long iron chain in its hand, and it was slashing toward Jian Wushuang's head. Rip! The strike created a series of sparks on Jian Wushuang's golden divine body and forced Jian Wushuang to take 3 steps back. A bell-like voice reverberated through the heavens and earth. "Oh!" Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and looked at the figure that was coming at him. He raised his eyebrows slightly. The red light dissipated, revealing the figure of the Blood Sky ruler. However, the Blood Sky Supreme was now a completely different person. His originally tall and burly body had become thin, as if his chi and blood had been sucked dry. His wrinkled skin was stuck to his bones. The 2 sides of his cheeks were deeply sunken, making his eyes bulge out. He didn't look like a living person, but more like a skeleton demon that had walked out of hell. Jian Wushuang, this blood pool was originally intended to be used to break through to the half-step unparalleled supreme level. But because of you, I have to use it in advance to recover from my injuries. You deserve to die. The Blood Sky Supreme's voice was hoarse, and he was panting slightly. His eyes had turned red. Go to hell. The Blood Sky Supreme took a heavy step forward and turned into a ray of blood light. He appeared in front of Jian Wushuang in a flash and slashed down with his sickle. Clang! The Blood Sky ruler slashed 13 times in a row at an extremely fast speed. Each slash was filled with endless evil chi, and the strong wind that followed it directly created a 10,000-foot-long gully on the ground of the star under him. This might seem simple, but in reality, the power of each flash was enough to kill a middle-grade supreme. Is this the power of a supreme martial artist? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and his eyes were filled with fighting intent. After breaking through to the supreme being realm, he had yet to unleash his true strength, and his hands were itching for a fight. Well, I'll use this Blood Sky ruler to test my strength. Come! Jian Wushuang laughed and activated his chaotic domineering body completely. His divine body emitted a bright light from the inside out. Like a god of war descending from the 9 heavens, he punched at Supreme Blood Sky. A vast amount of chi and blood surged. Jian Wushuang's punch triggered chi movement and directly hit the demonic moon scythe that Blood Sky ruler was slashing at. Bang! Suddenly, there was a muffled thunder and a mighty strong wind swept across the entire star under Jian Wushuang's feet, forming a sky-turning white wave. That was not all. Jian Wushuang did not stop there. He laughed and punched 13 times, hitting Blood Sky Supreme's sickle 13 times. Jian Wushuang did not show any signs of retreat as he faced the Blood Sky ruler, who had recovered to his peak. His fists landed on the Blood Sky ruler's sickle, causing it to tremble continuously. Even when Blood Sky ruler occasionally attacked Jian Wushuang didn't dodge and took the hit with his body. Ding ding dang dang. The crescent moon sickle hit Jian Wushuang's body and made a sound as if it had hit a steel plate. Jian Wushuang's divine light glowed and the golden light was like a raging wave. He stood like a god king, invincible and filled with the charm of unyielding, powerful, and eternal. Blood Sky ruler, even if you've recovered to your peak, you're still nothing. Jian Wushuang turned his head and said indifferently. He had only used the power of the chaotic domineering body so far. If he pulled out the Tarot Divine Sword, the Blood Sky ruler would be even more vulnerable. The Blood Sky ruler did not reply. Instead, he stared at Jian Wushuang and panted heavily. In the distance, the people on the small planet who had been hit by Jian Wushuang's vibration force were shocked to the extreme. The Blood Sky ruler, it couldn't even break his defense? Is Jian Wushuang still human? Someone gasped and said in fear. Naturally, they had heard of Jian Wushuang's achievements. They also knew that after Jian Wushuang broke through to the supreme level, he would definitely be incomparable to ordinary elementary supreme. However, they did not expect that Jian Wushuang had already reached the level where he could fight a supreme with his bare hands. This was nothing. Most importantly, they knew that Jian Wushuang's real trump card and strength was not his invincible body, but his powerful swordsmanship that could suppress the world. If Jian Wushuang were to use the Tarot Divine Sword, how powerful would he be? Everyone did not dare to think any further, only feeling their scalps go numb. On the star, the Blood Sky ruler's sunken face turned ashen. He had obviously realized this as well. After taking a deep breath, The Blood Sky Supreme's eyes were filled with madness as he said, "Jian Wushuang, I won't rest until I kill you. Secret skill, Blood Devil." He bit the tip of his tongue and used all his strength to shout. In an instant, his black robe fluttered in the wind as if it was being blown by a strong wind. His originally thin and shriveled body began to swell up rapidly like a balloon being inflated. Kachuk. In just a few breaths, he had turned into a mountain-like meatball. That wasn't the end. One after another, arms twisted and struggled to reach out from his body. On his stomach, countless ashen faces appeared. Some of these faces were filled with fear, some were filled with hatred, and most of them were filled with despair and pain. These people were all cultivators who had been devoured by the Blood Sky Supreme as food. In an instant, the Blood Sky ruler had turned into an ugly and disgusting human-shaped monster. Seeing this, everyone felt as if they had fallen into an icehouse, and their bodies turned cold. A powerful aura emanated from the Blood Sky Supreme. "Jian Wushuang, you should be proud to be able to see my real body." When the Blood Sky Supreme spoke, he emitted a terrifying sound wave that was unlike a human's. It was as if thousands of people were speaking at the same time. The overlapping sound waves made one's hair stand on end. The next moment, he raised his hand and slapped Jian Wushuang. A blood-red vital chi bullet as thick as a bucket condensed in his palm. Then, with a bang, he charged at Jian Wushuang. "Is this your true strength?" Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and he understood. As expected, the Blood Sky Supreme was not as simple as he seemed, as he was the leader of a force. "But you're still not enough." Shaking his head, Jian Wushuang's 5 well-defined fingers slowly grasped the hilt of the Tarot Divine sword at his waist. The Tarot Divine sword started to come out of its sheath inch by inch. Boom, boom, boom. The Tarot Divine sword had only been unsheathed half a second, but a tornado of sword chi had already spread out, forming a powerful sword pressure. Jian Wushuang's black hair flew up and his purple-gold eyes flashed with a touch of coldness. Sword draw. In an instant, the Tarot Divine sword seemed to have turned into a wild snake and slashed down at the blood pillar Yuan Chi bullet that was flying toward Jian Wushuang. At this moment, the vast sky seemed to have been split into two, leaving only a line. Everyone's vision turned black, and all that was left was a golden sword energy that slashed down in a beautiful arc. The Tarot Divine sword's true power suddenly exploded. The blood pillar energy ball shot out by the Blood Sky ruler was easily split into two as if it was tofu. The Zenith sword radiance continued to slash toward the Blood Sky ruler. "This kid." The Blood Sky Supreme gritted his teeth and stomped on the ground. Suddenly, he bounced up like a big meatball and dodged the sword. Although his body had become huge, his speed did not slow down at all. On the contrary, it increased rapidly. Boom, boom, boom. The sword cut the small planet under the Blood Sky Supreme's feet, and the entire planet was cut into two sides as if it was an egg. And this was not the end. After the sword light cut through the star without any hindrance, its power continued to shoot into the depths of the universe without any reduction. It only dissipated after it had rushed out tens of thousands of feet. The terrifying sword chi spread out wantonly, turning the area within 1,000 feet of Jian Wushuang into a forbidden zone. Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent. Now he could break the Milky Way and destroy planets with a casual sword. Secret skill, Blood Demon Arrow. The Blood Sky Supreme said quickly as he looked at Jian Wushuang. In an instant, the tens of thousands of arms that grew out of his body formed hand seals at the same time. A mighty, evil, and demonic sound came out of Blood Sky Ruler's stomach. It was as if his intestines were squirming. Then, blood arrows that looked like small snakes crawled out of his thousands of arms and shot toward Jian Wushuang. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. No words could describe the magnificence of this scene. Countless blood arrows blotted out the sky, filling the entire world as they shot over at an incredible speed. Each of these blood arrows was as terrifying as a beginner-level supreme martial artist's full-force attack. At this moment, 10,000 arrows were fired at the same time, and after converging together, They were enough to turn a top-tier supreme martial artist into a sieve. When the cultivators of the asteroid group who were watching the battle from a distance saw this, their eyelids twitched and they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. The Blood Sky Ruler was indeed too powerful. However, a scene that left them dumbfounded happened. Facing the tens of thousands of blood arrows, Jian Wushuang only squinted his eyes and said indifferently, "Sundering stars." In an instant, countless energies in the universe gathered in Jian Wushuang's hand and formed a 10,000-foot blue sword rainbow that fell down. This sword cut across the sky and pierced through the sun and moon. As the sword fell, the sharp and powerful sword chi directly minced in all directions, crushing countless blood swords into powder with a crushing force. One sword breaking all techniques. The Blood Sky Ruler was powerful, but Jian Wushuang was even more terrifying. Do. A dull sound rang out. Some of the blood arrows that were lucky enough not to be crushed by the star-slashing sword rainbow hit Jian Wushuang's body. However, they did not penetrate Jian Wushuang's body. Instead, they were like arrows that had hit a 100 feet thick steel plate. After sparks flew, they were actually deflected by the missile. Jian Wushuang even stretched out his hand, lowered his head, and grabbed a blood arrow. Then, he threw it at Blood Sky Ruler as if he was throwing a javelin. The blood arrow that Jian Wushuang had shot out had increased in both speed and power. Bang! The Blood Sky Supreme was hit by the reflected blood arrow, and he was forced to take 3 steps back. His face was flushed. This was not the end. The star-slashing sword that Jian Wushuang had previously slashed out had only dimmed a little after shattering the countless blood arrows. It then struck the Blood Sky Ruler's chest fiercely again and sent him flying like a baseball. In an instant, the hearts of countless people watching the battle from afar trembled, and their bodies trembled. Among them, there were many people whose cultivation was far superior to Jian Wushuang's, and there were even senior supreme existences. However, at this moment, they were all shocked and exclaimed, "Jian Wushuang is a freak, a strong body and unparalleled swordsmanship." Not only was its attack unrivaled, but its defense was also unrivaled. Who else can beat Jian Wushuang? I'm afraid there's no one below the half-step unparalleled supreme level who can pose a threat to Jian Wushuang. This is too terrifying. At that moment, everyone stared at Jian Wushuang with extreme fear in their eyes. Before this, they had never imagined that the Blood Sky Hall Master, who had dominated the asteroid belt for nearly 500 chaos cycles, would one day be forced back by someone who wasn't an invincible ruler. It was as if the Blood Sky Supreme was not the brutal blood demon in Jian Wushuang's hands, but a pellet that he could casually knead. No wonder people said that without seeing Jian Wushuang's skills, they would never understand his strength and his amazing talent. Countless people thought of the rumors that had once spread in the universe. At first, they were disdainful and thought that Jian Wushuang's several moves were either by relying on supreme treasures like the Tarot Divine Sword and the Wushu Chaotic Cauldron, or by using the power of the Lightning Tribulation. His actual level was not that great. However, at this moment they suddenly realized that they were wrong, and they were ridiculously wrong. They thought of another saying that had been circulating in the universe. How lucky he was to be in the same era as Jian Wushuang, and how unfortunate he was to be in the same era as Jian Wushuang. Ever since Jian Wushuang's rise, the holy sons of holy lands and divine sons of divine nations who had been galloping in the depths of the universe had all disappeared. They had been suppressed by Jian Wushuang's name and could not even release any light. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm as he stepped on the ground. His eyes were burning with golden flames and his voice shook the world like thunder. "Blood Sky Hall Master, if this is all you've got, you won't be able to live past the time it takes for an incense stick to burn." The Blood Sky Supreme's face turned ashen when he heard this. "Jian Wushuang, you're too arrogant. I, Blood Sky, have experienced thousands of battles. What kind of storms have I not seen? I'm telling you, Jian Wushuang, you don't have the final say in my life. You're still far from being able to kill me." The Blood Sky Supreme roared and used his secret skill again. At this moment, he still hadn't given up and wanted to fight to the death with Jian Wushuang. "Is that so?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and then shook his head. You're so stubborn. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold killing intent flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He said slowly, Tarot Sword Manual, second move. The first beam of light that was torn apart in the deepest darkness. Daybreak. A golden light suddenly appeared. Immediately after, sword chi filled the entire hall and swept across the starry sky. At this moment, all that was within everyone's sight was darkness, as if it was an eternal night. Only one golden light kept on shining. This golden light was like the first ray of light before the sunrise between heaven and earth. It was like the first force that opened up the chaos, tearing apart all the blurry darkness. This beam of light was getting brighter and brighter. Finally, it suddenly occupied everyone's pupils. It replaced everything. Slash. Kill. A cold voice rang out. Then, everyone felt a blur in front of their eyes. The golden light was like a thunderbolt that flashed across the world and headed toward the Blood Sky ruler. When Jian Wushuang performed Daybreak, he was much stronger than before. In addition to the great improvement brought by the breakthrough to the supreme level, Jian Wushuang's comprehension of the Tarot Sword Manual had improved too much after fighting with Tarot Supreme for 10,000 years in the virtual space. In those 10,000 years, Jian Wushuang had fought with Tarot Supreme 8,000 times. Each time they fought, it was like Tarot Supreme was teaching him. Close to 8,000 exchanges were equivalent to close to 8,000 lessons. How terrifying was this? Even an uncivilized pig could become a grandmaster after comprehending one thing 8,000 times, let alone a person with extraordinary talent and comprehension like Jian Wushuang. It could be said that Jian Wushuang's comprehension of eternal night and daybreak had reached the point of perfection and familiarity, even if it was not at the peak. Rumble! The golden light approached the Blood Sky Supreme at a high speed, leaving a long white wave in the void. Jian Wushuang, the Blood Sky Supreme's pupils immediately contracted, and he shouted with all his strength, Supreme Divine Art, Blood Demon's Wrath. As soon as he finished speaking, the human faces on his stomach, neck, and legs, which were in pain and fear, opened their mouths and roared. Shrill howls sounded out, as if they were evil ghosts who were being executed in hell. They kept letting out shrill howls, and terrifying sound waves spread out. Their expressions became even more pained. Then, the Blood Sky Supreme took a deep breath, and a whirlpool the size of a small lake appeared in his mouth like a whale sucking in water. The countless arms and human faces on his body were all sucked into his mouth. The next moment, the Blood Sky Supreme's cheeks bulged like a crouching toad that was about to attack. In the Blood Sky Supreme's mouth, countless energy twisted and condensed. Go to hell! The Blood Sky Supreme opened his mouth, and an extremely foul-smelling blood-red ball shot out of his mouth like a missile. Roar! 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 This blood-red ball was even larger and more majestic than the sun. As it rolled, everything in the universe seemed to be overshadowed and could not be compared to it, other than the golden light that could tear the sky apart. Buzz! In an instant, the golden light and the blood-red ball collided. Shockwaves spread out, causing an earthquake with a magnitude of 1,000,000. The surrounding void shattered inch by inch like glass being smashed by a sledgehammer. Jian Wushuang, let's see if you'll die this time. The Blood Sky ruler laughed madly. Now, in order to kill Jian Wushuang, he had cut off the road ahead and was crazy enough to do it at any cost. Break! An indifferent voice came from the golden light of dawn. Then, the golden sword energy, which cut the sky and the earth and split the ocean, stabbed into the blood-red ball. Zzz. A terrifying sound came from the blood-red ball. The people who were watching the battle from a distance only saw a blur before they saw Jian Wushuang rushing out from the other end of the blood-red ball and penetrating through the middle like a candied fruit. Sharp and overbearing. This was the unique characteristic of the Tarot Divine Sword as a supreme ancestral weapon that was in charge of killing. If it was the Wuxia Divine Sword, it would have been crushed by the blood-red ball. However, the Tarot Divine Sword didn't lose any of its brilliance. After all, this was a peerless weapon that could suppress the universe. In the next moment, The golden light of dawn rushed out of the blood-red ball and continued to press forward. It crashed into the Blood Sky Ruler's body and pierced through him. No! The Blood Sky Supreme finally looked horrified and let out a heart-wrenching scream. Immediately after, everyone saw the universe's starry sky in the great dark sky gradually regain its clarity. Jian Wushuang's figure had already appeared behind the Blood Sky Ruler. The golden light gradually dissipated, revealing Jian Wushuang's emotionless face. He held the hilt of the Tarot Divine Sword with his 5 well-defined fingers and looked back indifferently. Crack! A huge human-shaped hole appeared in the Blood Sky Supreme's meatball divine body, which was as tall as a mountain. Countless strong winds whistled through the hole. Immediately after, cracks started to appear from the sides of the bloody hole on his stomach. Like a spider web, countless cracks extended out. Bang! Finally, with a loud boom, the blood demon's body of the Blood Sky Supreme exploded. Green liquid and divine blood fell from the sky like a rain of blood, and a foul smell filled the air. In that instant, the countless cultivators who were watching the battle from afar were all shocked. They looked at this scene in a daze and were tongue-tied. 1. He killed it with a single sword strike? The Blood Sky Supreme is no match for Jian Wushuang? The Blood Sky Ruler was one of the top Supremes, but he was killed by Jian Wushuang, who had just entered the Supreme Realm, with one stroke. At this moment, countless people felt as if there was a fishbone stuck in their throats, unable to speak. The Blood Sky Supreme had been defeated. This ruler who had dominated the entire asteroid belt for nearly 1,000 chaos cycles had finally been defeated. Countless eyes were fixed on Jian Wushuang. In their eyes, it was as if a sun was setting and a brighter sun was rising. They knew that the owners of this small group of planets, where nearly 10,000 cultivators from all walks of life gathered, had changed. The Blood Sky Palace, which was feared by countless people in the universe, would no longer exist. At this moment, many people's expressions were extremely complicated. Show. No one noticed that after the Blood Sky Supreme's divine body exploded, a drop of divine blood quietly shot into the distance. It was the Blood Sky Ruler. It was also his last life-saving magical ability. Jian Wushuang, the green will never change. After I recover, it's still unknown who will win. The Blood Sky Ruler's venomous voice came from the drop of divine blood. Pada. Suddenly, he seemed to have hit something and stopped. What? Blood Sky Ruler raised his head and saw Jian Wushuang looking down at him expressionlessly. Where do you want to go? Jian Wushuang spoke in an indifferent voice. How did you find me? The Blood Sky Supreme felt a chill down his spine. This was the first time he had ever felt such a great horror when he was on the verge of death. Bang! In the next moment, he saw Jian Wushuang reach out his big hand to grab him. No! Jian Wushuang, don't! I, Blood Sky, am willing to submit to you. Please spare me. At this moment, all the resentment and dignity of a top Supreme had disappeared. Only the fear of death remained in his heart. He begged Jian Wushuang to spare his life. However, it was useless. Rumble! The surging divine power squeezed out of Jian Wushuang's palm and crushed the divine blood that was Ruler Blood Sky into powder. The Blood Sky Supreme had finally died. The Blood Sky Ruler was dead. The man who had once stood at the peak of the universe and was the leader of a force had died in the hands of Jian Wushuang. Above the starry sky, Jian Wushuang stood with his hands behind his back. His black hair was flying. His eyes were burning with fire, and his handsome face was indifferent. Countless stars were under his feet. He was like a god, the master of the stars. For a moment, everyone in the minor planetary system had their mouths wide open, and there was silence. The Blood Sky Ruler had ruled over them for nearly 1,000 chaos cycles, and their fear of him had been etched into their bones. They had never thought that the Blood Sky Ruler would fall at the hands of others one day. All of this had happened too suddenly. It was like a dream, giving people a sense of surrealism. After a long time, when Jian Wushuang had left, they slowly came back to their senses. They looked at each other and instantly became excited. He's fallen. The Blood Sky Supreme, a giant star, has fallen. It seems that Jian Wushuang will have to settle the old scores now that he has broken through to the Supreme Master level. That's right. If I'm not wrong, the Blood Sky Ruler is just the beginning. Jian Wushuang will not let any of the 6 major forces go. It seems that something big is going to happen in the universe. Countless people thought of this, and their hearts trembled. Then, the news that Jian Wushuang had come out of seclusion cultivation to kill Blood Sky Ruler spread at an extremely fast speed and instantly swept the entire universe. Immediately, the universe was in an uproar as if a heavy bomb had been dropped. Divine Life Palace, Supreme Divine Palace. Ha ha ha. This kid, I knew he would succeed. The ruler Blood Wave's hearty laughter rang out from the usually solemn hall. This morning, the news had reached the Divine Life Palace. Jian Wushuang had killed the Hall Master of the Blood Sky Hall, the Blood Sky Supreme, in the small planetary group. The entire universe was shocked. The 9th Culpa King, Supreme Giant Axe, and the core members of the Sword Union were all sitting on both sides, and they also smiled when they heard this. Jian Wushuang is always calm when he doesn't make a move, but when he does, it's earth-shattering. The 9th Culpa King shook his head and said. His expression was one of helplessness, but he was also happy for Jian Wushuang. Blood Sky Ruler is considered an expert among the top-tier rulers. Even I found it difficult to deal with him. I didn't expect Jian Wushuang to be able to kill him by himself. Supreme Giant Axe sighed with emotion. He then turned to look at Ruler Blood Wave and laughed. Blood Wave, I'm afraid Jian Wushuang's power is no longer less than yours and mine. The ruler Blood Wave nodded with a smile and replied, That's right. In my opinion, it won't take long for Jian Wushuang to grow to the point where he can protect my Divine Life Palace. This kid's talent is too shocking. The supreme martial artists chatted and laughed with each other. However, the overlord of the Sword Union seemed to have thought of something, and his expression was a little worried. Upon seeing this, the ruler Blood Wave couldn't help but tease. Little friend Overlord, what are you worried about? Could it be that you still can't get over the fact that Jian Wushuang didn't bring you along with him? Hearing this, the Overlord quickly collected his thoughts and replied, No. Since the Alliance leader did this, he must have his own considerations. Oh? Then, little friend Overlord, why do you look so worried? The ruler Blood Wave couldn't help but be surprised. The great Overlord took a deep breath and cupped his hands. Ruler Blood Wave, everyone knows that the Alliance leader killed the Blood Sky ruler. Many people have already expected that the Alliance leader wants to find the 6 great forces one by one. I'm afraid that the other forces have already made preparations. I'm worried that Lord Alliance leader will fall into an ambush. The ruler Blood Wave didn't look as worried as the Overlord had imagined. Instead, he patted the Overlord's shoulder and looked through the entrance of the Supreme Divine Hall into the distant void. Little friend Overlord, don't worry. Whatever you can think of, Jian Wushuang will naturally think of it as well. We don't need to care about this. We just need to wait here for Jian Wushuang's good news. Hearing this, the Overlord was stunned. Then he said with a bitter smile, That's true. As the news of Jian Wushuang killing the Blood Sky ruler spread, the originally peaceful universe was once again in turmoil. In the depths of the universe, in the Great Void Temple. Bang! Supreme Bing Yi smashed the armrest of his throne into pieces with a single slap. His face was ashen as he said, Bastard! We haven't even gone to find trouble with Jian Wushuang. But he dares to find trouble with us? Does he really think he's a big shot? Supreme Bing Ye's voice was filled with rage. Below him, less than 10% of the supreme martial artists who had been sitting in the hall were left. There were only 2 or 3 small cats left. Hall Master, please calm your anger. A supreme being from the Great Void Temple comforted. As soon as these words were spoken, the already unsightly expression on Supreme Bing Ye's face became even more unsightly. I've said it many times. I'm now the Divine Emperor of the Great Void Temple, not the Hall Master. Supreme Bing Yi shot him a cold look. Hearing this, the supreme martial artists looked at each other and sighed. Ever since Supreme Bing Yi failed to kill Jian Wushuang and was humiliated by the white-haired ancestor, he had become more temperamental. I know. The supreme martial artist nodded. then said with a slightly worried tone, "Sir Emperor God, now that Jian Wushuang has grown up, I'm afraid he will come to our door in a few days. It's better for us to be prepared." "Make early preparations? With just Jian Wushuang?" Supreme Bing Yi sneered contemptuously upon hearing this and shook his head. "Do you think I'm that trash, Blood Sky? Would I be afraid of Jian Wushuang? Humph, it's fine if he doesn't come, but if he dares to come, I'll make sure he won't be able to return." When the supreme martial artists heard this, hesitation flashed across their faces. They felt that Supreme Bing Yi was too conceited. Supreme Bing Yi saw through their thoughts and snorted coldly. "I think you're all scared out of your wits by Jian Wushuang. No matter how strong he is, he's only a beginner supreme. What a disgrace." After casting a cold glance at the supreme martial artists, Supreme Bing Yi strode out. In the hall, the few supreme beings could not help but laugh bitterly. After looking at each other, they felt that Jian Wushuang alone would not cause any trouble for the Great Void Temple. After all, besides Supreme Bing Ye's half-step unrivaled cultivation, they still had other trump cards. At the thought of this, they heaved a sigh of relief. However, for some reason, they still felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness. At the same time, in the universe, a universe boat was traveling in the starry sky, breaking through the nebulas. The speed of this universe boat wasn't fast. It was neither fast nor slow, and it seemed to be quite leisurely. Inside universe boat, a cold-looking young man in a black robe was sitting cross-legged and playing with a jade cylinder in his hand. The man was none other than Jian Wushuang. The jade cylinder was given to him by the Blood Wave Supreme when he left the Divine Life Palace. It contained detailed information about the 6 forces. If it weren't for the Blood Sky Ruler's Blood Demon Division technique, he might have escaped. Jian Wushuang raised his head and sighed. No one who could cultivate to the top of the Supreme Being level was weak. Not only was the Blood Sky Supreme powerful and had many tricks up his sleeve, but he also had an innate divine power similar to his divine power disintegration. However, from this, I can also deduce that my current strength is definitely far above that of a top-tier supreme martial artist. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang could not help but smile. After fighting with the Blood Sky Ruler, he finally had a rough understanding of his own strength. He was now able to fight a top supreme being with just the chaotic domineering body. For example, he could fight evenly with the Blood Sky Hall Master and the others. If he were to use the Tarot Divine Sword, he would have the ability to kill a supreme being. Furthermore, this was not even the situation where he had to use his trump card. For example, the last 3 moves of the Tarot Sword Manual, Dusk, 4 Seasons, and Tarot. Each of the 3 sword skills was stronger than the last. Once he used them, he could probably kill a supreme being like the Blood Sky Hall Master in an instant. My current battle prowess should be above that of a top-tier supreme, but I'm still not at the level of an invincible supreme. Jian Wushuang's eyes revealed a thoughtful look. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never seen many unparalleled supremes in action, such as Supreme Gai Fu, Supreme Black Feather, the Hall Master of Cosmos Temple, and the Tyrant's Patriarch. Any one of them had the power to kill a top supreme being with a wave of their hands. In front of them, a top supreme being was nothing but a clay chicken or a pottery dog. Even Long Bai of the Dragon Clan, who had just broken through to the invincible ruler level, had repelled the joint forces of Supreme Blood Wave, Supreme Giant Axe, and the 9th Culpa King with just a slight bump on the battlefield in the Divine Life Palace. In that case, my current strength should be around that of a half-step unparalleled ruler, or perhaps even slightly stronger. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed. After a while, Jian Wushuang gathered his thoughts and opened the 2nd page of the bamboo tube. The information recorded on it was about the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. The Great Sun Divine Kingdom. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and there was a flash of coldness in his eyes. Boom! The next moment, Universe Boat accelerated and disappeared into the starry sky. In the depths of the universe, the Great Sun Divine Kingdom had a vast territory and occupied 3-star areas. It ruled over tens of billions of people and was considered a well-known top force in the universe. After the last King of Day was destroyed in the war, the power of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom had been reduced, but it was still not to be underestimated. Today was the day the Great Sun Divine Kingdom would pay their respects to their Great Sun Patriarch. A sacrificial ceremony was a grand event that was held every 100 chaos cycles in the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. It was a ceremony to sing praises to the founding emperor of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom for the series of heroic feats he had accomplished. As a result, the imperial city of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom was filled with decorations and festooned with festoons. It was a festive scene, regardless of whether it was the sects that ruled the Great Sun Divine Kingdom or the other forces that had always been on good terms with the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. Today, they all brought all kinds of expensive gifts to the Great Sun Divine Kingdom to congratulate him. In the middle of the city there was a towering palace. It was the palace of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. The Empyrean Terminus Divine Sect has brought 10 pills of fortune, 20 top-grade offensive supreme treasures, and 500,000 universe origin stones to congratulate the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. Supreme Jade Cauldron has come with the resources of 10 planets to congratulate the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. The servants of the ceremonial department began to sing. Early in the morning, the representatives of the forces that were on good terms with the Great Sun Divine Kingdom arrived. In the throne room of the royal palace, the King of Day sat on the throne. The messengers who had come to visit were listed next, and the princes of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom were listed at the end. Everyone talked and laughed about the wind and pointed out the rivers and mountains. It was very enjoyable. King of Day, have you heard of the major event that happened in the universe recently? After 3 rounds of drinks, a strong man looked at the King of Day and said with a smile, "Rainforest Supreme, are you talking about how Jian Wushuang killed the Blood Sky Hall Master?" The King of Day's smile faded and he asked, "Not bad." The rainforest ruler nodded and kindly reminded, "King of Day, you're not far from the Blood Sky Palace. You have to be careful of Jian Wushuang." Now that Jian Wushuang had achieved his goal, many of the supreme masters present were afraid of him. The King of Day nodded his head. He was also a top supreme. In terms of power, he was not much weaker than the Blood Sky Hall Master. Since Jian Wushuang could kill the Blood Sky Hall Master, it meant that Jian Wushuang had the same ability as him. Taking a deep breath, the King of Day looked at the old man who was ranked first and said, "Don't worry, everyone. I've already made preparations and specially invited Supreme Jade Cauldron to come and protect me. Furthermore, Supreme Jade Cauldron has already promised me that he will kill Jian Wushuang if he dares to cause trouble." After a pause, the King of Day looked at Supreme Jade Cauldron and smiled apologetically. "Don't you agree, Supreme Jade Cauldron?" Supreme Jade Cauldron had a skinny figure, and his silver hair was tied up with a wooden hairpin. He looked like an immortal. "That's right. With me around, Jian Wushuang won't be able to do anything." Supreme Martial Artist Jade Cauldron nodded with a proud expression. When the other Supreme Martial Artists heard this, they heaved a sigh of relief. Supreme Jade Cauldron was a well-known Supreme in the universe. He had already broken through to become a half-step unparalleled Supreme hundreds of chaos cycles ago. With him around, there was naturally no need to fear Jian Wushuang. Haha! Since the King of Day has already asked Supreme Jade Cauldron to help, everything will be fine. It's fine if Jian Wushuang doesn't come. If he does, Supreme Jade Cauldron will teach him a good lesson. Otherwise, Jian Wushuang will really be lawless and think that no one in the world can suppress him. With Supreme Jade Cauldron here, we can drink to our heart's content. Jian Wushuang is not worth mentioning. Disdainful sneers were heard and the palace became lively again. The words were full of disdain and contempt for Jian Wushuang. One of the princes, who was wearing a luxurious robe, stood up and said, "Father, it's just Jian Wushuang. Why does Supreme Jade Cauldron need to take action? If he dares to come, I can cut off his head by myself." The King of Day laughed and said, "It's not easy for my son to have such courage. After he inherits my position, he'll definitely achieve great things. However, Jian Wushuang is indeed powerful, and you have just broken through to the supreme level. You should stabilize your realm first before talking about killing Jian Wushuang." When the prince heard this, he respectfully agreed, but he was quite dissatisfied in his heart. In his opinion, Jian Wushuang was the same as him. He had just broken through to the supremacy stage and could not be that strong. Humph. If Jian Wushuang didn't have the Tarot Divine Sword, it's hard to say who's stronger. The prince snorted in his heart. At the same time, a handsome young man in a loose black robe, with a sword hanging at his waist and a bamboo hat covering half of his face, with only his chin exposed, had already walked into Great Sun Divine Kingdom step by step. This Great Sun Divine Kingdom sure is prosperous. Jian Wushuang walked on the Imperial Road and looked around casually. This Great Sun Divine Kingdom occupied nearly half of the planet's position. The land was vast, but it did not seem empty at all. Instead, it was particularly lively. There were constantly people walking past him in a hurry, discussing with each other. Quick, quick, quick. I heard that the Imperial Palace has taken out hundreds of divine medicines for this ancestral worship ceremony and is going to reward them to the world. Today was supposed to be the day when the old emperor abdicated and the new emperor ascended the throne. But in the end, the young emperor was killed by Jian Wushuang on the ancient path of stars. Everything turned into a dream. Do you think Jian Wushuang will come to the wedding today? Who knows? But I heard that the Emperor God has hired an expert to guard the palace. If Jian Wushuang dares to come, he will make sure that he will not be able to return. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's hurry to the Imperial Palace and fight for a share of the divine medicine and universe origin stones. What does the battle between these great figures have to do with us? That's true. Let's hurry up. Don't let others get there first. Discussions were heard. Jian Wushuang walked with his hands behind his back, so no one recognized him. Is today the grand ceremony of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom? They even hired experts to guard the place. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and then a smile appeared on his face. He didn't know if the King of Day would like his gift. While thinking, Jian Wushuang walked toward the Great Sun Palace. There were more and more pedestrians on the way, and they were all in a hurry. Among them, a ruler carrying an axe saw that Jian Wushuang was not in a hurry and even kindly reminded him, "Little brother, you have to hurry up and hold on tight. If you are any slower, there will be nothing left." Jian Wushuang replied with a smile, "It's fine. I'm not there to receive the reward. I'm there to give you a gift." The chief ruler carrying the axe was stunned when he heard this. He shook his head and didn't say anything else. He just continued to rush forward. The King of Day Imperial Palace had a total of 9 halls and 3 doors. The side doors on both sides were for ordinary cultivators to walk through, and they were also used to distribute rewards. The arched door in the middle was used to welcome the congratulatory emissaries. Only those who had received the invitation of the King of Day could enter. Halt! Jian Wushuang had just walked to the middle palace door when 2 divine generals at the ultimate ruler realm blocked him with their halberds. "Do you have an invitation?" The 2 divine generals spoke coldly. "No, I don't." Jian Wushuang replied indifferently. He was wearing a bamboo hat that only revealed his chin. "So you're here to collect your reward? The items are at the side doors. Please leave." The 2 divine generals sized up Jian Wushuang and found his aura ordinary. He didn't seem to be an important person, so they immediately rebuked him. Jian Wushuang could not help but smile and replied, "I'm here to give you a gift to congratulate you." "Eh? Then take off your bamboo hat and let us confirm your identity." The 2 divine generals looked at each other and said, "All right." Jian Wushuang nodded his head and then slowly took off the bamboo hat. A cold and handsome face was immediately revealed. In the next moment, a thunderous voice suddenly exploded. "Jian Wushuang from the Divine Life Palace is here to attend the ceremony and congratulate you." Boom! In an instant, the sound reverberated for thousands of miles, and the entire city was in an uproar. "What? Jian Wushuang? Jian Wushuang is here. Not good. Quickly stop him and report to the Divine Emperor." The 2 divine generals trembled, their faces turning pale. Jian Wushuang's reputation was too great. The number of supremes who had died in his hands was no less than 10. There was even a giant armed existence like the Blood Sky Hall Master who dominated a region. The cultivators who were receiving the rewards in the distance were also shocked. The axe-bearing cultivator who had greeted Jian Wushuang before was so shocked that his eyes almost fell out. He said, He is Jian Wushuang? The two divine generals shuddered and hurriedly shouted, "Quickly activate the city's defensive array." With that, they clapped their hands and retreated into the palace. Divine power surged. Buzz! A blazing sun suddenly rose from the center of the palace. Immediately, countless rays of divine light spread out from the sun, forming a light shield that was like an eggshell, protecting the entire palace. Is this how the great Sun Divine Kingdom treats their guests? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and immediately took a step forward. His body suddenly soared into the sky and turned into a golden light, sweeping above the entire palace. Bang! The next moment, Jian Wushuang looked down at the entire palace and stomped his right foot heavily. Boom! Suddenly, a surge of violent power that was surging to the extreme hit the light shield that protected the palace hard as Jian Wushuang stomped his right foot. In an instant, the entire Great Sun Divine Kingdom shook violently like an earthquake. The imperial palace in the center of Great Sun Divine Kingdom was like a small boat in the raging sea, as if it would break at any time. Jian Wushuang from the Divine Life Palace is here to congratulate the Great Sun Divine Kingdom. Jian Wushuang's indifferent voice boomed again. The residents in the entire Great Sun Divine Kingdom felt as if a heavy bomb had been dropped in their ears. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear. Inside the King of Day Palace, the faces of the King of Day and the others who were drinking and having fun suddenly changed. Jian Wushuang, bastard! The King of Day stood up and his face was dark. Pa! The wine glass in his hand was smashed to the ground, shattering into pieces. He was not surprised that Jian Wushuang would come. But today it had to be the ancestor worship ceremony. This was too much. Ruler Jade Cauldron. The King of Day took a deep breath and turned to Supreme Jade Cauldron. Supreme Jade Cauldron's expression was indifferent. Seeing this, he nodded slightly and drank the divine wine in his cup. He then said, "Don't worry, I'm here today. Jian Wushuang won't be able to cause any trouble. Go ahead and fight him. If you can't defeat him, I'll take action." That's good. The King of Day heaved a sigh of relief, and just as he was about to head out, Great Sun Prince, who was sitting at the back, stood up and said, "Father, please calm down. Jian Wushuang is just an early-stage supreme. He has the same cultivation as me. Why do you need to lower yourself and attack him? Humph. This child will go and meet him and see what kind of ability he has to dare be so arrogant." With that, Prince King of Day strode out of the palace. "My son, you mustn't." The King of Day's expression changed. Just as he was about to stop him, Great Sun Prince took a step forward and flew into the sky like a flowing light, facing Jian Wushuang. This is bad. The King of Day's heart sank. He didn't dare to waste any time and quickly chased after Great Sun Prince.